Hi, everybody. Welcome to another perfectly flawless launch of the Stratosphere Lounge experience. Hope everybody's doing well. Um, Last time was my first time back after being out at the Wuhan weight loss clinic, and just ended up talking about a bunch of cool stuff. So tonight we're just going to do just a minute or two or three or four, and then we'll get to questions and see if we can get a little caught up there. Excuse me. Going to be a little more of that too. I don't know if you guys have been noticing this or feeling this, but it's like this is how things go. You know, the Soviet Union was there for what, almost 80 years, and then it wasn't, and like that overnight. And it feels kind of like that's what's happening with COVID. It just that's just how things feel to me. That that so many people are getting so sick so fast, that that essentially this thing is going to be largely over. Wizard says we have 80% of people 3 times vaxxed and they're all catching Omicron. Government is desperate to hide this. Yes, exactly. So all across the world now, on the way in, I heard that France reported 463,000 cases of Omicron a month. Was it a bad week? One day. One day. So, a couple things to say here. First of all, from a larger perspective, yeah, and Fiery Waco points out the UK dropped all the mandates. No more vaccine passports. No more mask requirements. Germany and Brazil, says Wizard. Here's the thing. On the larger perspective, kind of the Jesus plane that I so rarely find myself on. This is nothing but good news. This is what happens. This is how pandemics go. You get a particularly virulent disease, which this wasn't. But as time goes on, the more lethal strains of the virus disappear because they kill the people that are their hosts. And what you get is you get a mutation towards more contagious, but much less dangerous. And AIDS looks like AIDS did pretty much the same thing. And I remember I saw Magic Johnson on TV not too long ago, and he's looking pretty good. And I remember when he announced that he had AIDS, I was still a limo driver, so that must have been 91, 92, somewhere in there. And he's still with us, and the reason he's still with us is that the AIDS that Magic Johnson got wasn't the AIDS that killed so many people. It's the same basic virus, just not nearly so deadly because the deadly versions had died out with the people that it killed too. But it seems like everywhere, it feels to me like the wheels are finally coming off of this thing. So on a high level, that's great. It's the best possible outcome other than it not ever getting out of the Victrola factory in the first place. But if that happens, then this is good because everybody's getting sick and everybody's going to have natural immunity, and all over the world this seems to be happening. And on a much lower plane, which is the plane I usually operate on, I just can't help but feel like they know it's over, and they don't seem like there's much left that they can do, because essentially, gang, here's how it works. This is why I think it's essentially over politically. From the day it happened, let me just scroll up here because our stalwart Dave Big Booty always gives me the number here. 675 days ago of 15 days to flatten the curve. During the last 675 days, the entire thing has been, here's this horrible disease, and So do what we say, otherwise you're going to die, like these people were showing you here with these ever increasing bar numbers and graphs and all the rest of it. The problem is that this Omicron variant is so contagious and spreading so fast that the half of the population that bought into that, they're getting sick now, because they were the ones that were always triple careful, 3 masks on and kiss grandma on the Zoom call, and streaming funerals. And that crowd, which has been so hysterical, is now coming down with it, despite however many Victrolas they may have. And even worse for them, not for humanity or all of us. Like I said, this is not the higher plane that I sometimes can at least see. Unfortunately, for the half of the country that's been terrified of this, they're getting sick with COVID now too, and the tragedy is they're surviving it. I don't mean that in a nasty way, like it's a tragedy for me that they're surviving it. It's a tragedy for them that they're surviving it. It's got to be tough. We talk about the side effects of this. We, not meaning the media or anybody, but the side effects, the suicides, the business closures, the spousal abuse, the child abuse, the alcoholism increase, the all of the undetected cancer, the whole thing. It makes me wonder, what will the psychological impact be when people who have invested so much in this thing being this fatal angel of death that's just hovering outside their door, what is the psychological effect going to be when they find out that it's actually the, pigeon of death? Because it is definitely coming apart for them, and it's coming apart for them everywhere. Not just through all the origins of where the Victrola might have come from, and all of the stuff that we've been talking about for 2 years. Honestly, it started in middle of March 2020, and that we're rapidly approaching the 2-year anniversary of that. And by the beginning of April, 3-4 weeks into, I did the Chronosphere Lounge for 30 days, every day. And by the time we were a third of the way through that, we had most of the answers. And by the time we were 30 days into it, nothing that I believed after 30 days of this is any different than what I believe after 675 days of that. And thanks again, I don't know if you're watching, to Lord Bios, who got me out of a lot of trouble and certainly helped me an awful lot understanding the details. I think I got the main picture, but there you go. So what are all these people going to do? Well, by happy coincidence, I heard that yet another poll came out saying it's the biggest shift towards Republicans in the history of polling. I think it was Gallup this time. 14-point swing, a 12-point swing. That's now. What's going to happen when the people that have been told for 2 years that this is a death sentence if you don't wear the mask, what's going to happen when they get sick and recover? Some of them will not change their minds. No question. That the emotional investment that they made in this, that's just, for many of them, that's just an unbreakable bond. But it does make me wonder if there's not a significant percentage of the population that's going to basically say, well, we've been told this by the news media, which we trusted, and turns out that was all wrong. And all of these conservative yahoos who've been saying, no, just, it's deadly for certain kinds of people with, if you happen to have four comorbidities, then you probably should stay far away from COVID. But of course, if you've got 4 comorbidities, 2.6 was the average a year ago, and I've heard it's up to like 4 now or something, then you are in real danger anyway. So what happens to them? What happens to them when it did that? Now we're getting some interesting stats. Merlin Stark says, I've got several former Democrat friends who joined our team. Well, there we go. One anecdote, and it's proven. One internet commenter has said that this theory of mine is actually been observed, so obviously it's proven. Now, being flip because I'm in kind of a flip mood. I quick opportunity to brag as usual, and then we'll get to getting one of the onto the questions here. But my friend Bert Rutan, and that's the bragging part. I never tire of being able to say that. Did spend his entire life basically analyzing data. And now a lot of that data he generated himself, because a lot of that data was from airplanes that he designed and so on. But you've got theory and then you've got practice. And when you build an airplane, try to fly it, you go out there and you look at data. And it's not just little data points like me talking about like, the Last Jedi. No, and I talk about data, I'm talking about just columns and columns and columns of numbers. So, I don't know, 4 days ago, I get an email from Bert saying, hey, I hope you're feeling better. Listen, are you sure that it was Omicron that you came down with? Because I'm looking at the numbers and the spread and stuff, and it didn't seem very likely and so on. I thought, well, there's the big brain at work. The guy looks at data and discovers the patterns that are actually there. He did that with the whole global warming thing, too. And I said, no, I made a joke about it being Omega. I might have said Omicron in the first of the 2 updates I did, but I'm virtually positive it was Delta because it just laid us low. Natasha and I just, oh, hey, baby, by the way, hello. Just laid low. So we were pretty sure it was Delta. And then he wrote me back something, and it was a sentence that just knocked me out. And I think about it several times a day. He wrote me back, and this is the first thing he wrote. He said, well, first of all, congratulations, your pandemic is over. What else do you read after that? How brilliantly is that put? Congratulations, not the pandemic is over, your pandemic is over. You now have natural immunity, which we fought for, by the way. Every single one of my T cells has got the frickin'. Well, they were all awarded the Navy Cross, and many of them, they're pushing Silver Star, 1 or 2 of them, potential Medal of Honor. So we earned it, but isn't that a great sentence? Your pandemic is over. Because while there's plenty of evidence of people having problems with Omicron coming leaping out of them, even if they have 3 or 4 Victrolas in their living room, I haven't heard any cases of Omicron burning through natural immunity. And frankly, if you got your natural immunity before Omicron, you're probably not even going to notice Omicron, because Delta was no fun at all. And this is where I get to really build up a serious, murderous rage at my nephew Ashton, who was the best kid in the entire world, and that rotten little bastard with his 13-year-old immune system, which got in the car, got sick that night, threw up one time, laid on the couch for 15 hours, and then after that is running around doing these virtual reality games. Curse him and his 13-year-old immune system, which essentially just said to this virus, oh, come on, really? Now? Oh, all right, fine, all right, let's do it now. So anyway, there you go. So my pandemic is over. My wife's pandemic is over. If you have contracted COVID and survived it. But I'd like to talk now to the people who didn't survive it. No, then your pandemic is over. Now the question is, when will the politics catch up with you? I live in the most repressive state in the nation. We've been turned away from restaurants, turned away once. Just, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not showing you papers, and simply turned around on a few other cases. But what happens when the politics of that catches up to it? What happens when everybody is able to say, let me rephrase that, what happens when everybody in the world, let me try that a third time. What happens when Bert Rutan can say to everybody in the world what he said to me? Congratulations, your pandemic is over. And then we're already starting to see signs that the press is backtracking and governments are backtracking and all the rest of it. Now, if it turns out that downstream there are a number of serious side effects, then that party shift is going to get even bigger. So anyway, enough about that. Still got a little bit of a tickle cough. It's probably mostly just nerves and, like I said, not really related to being sick. Okay, so the second thing briefly is I'm going to spend very little time on this, but it's got to do with the state of the animation. So I finished chapter 1. We previewed it to the live audience here on the Stratosphere Lounge. So maybe, I don't know, maybe 100 people have seen it, something like that, altogether. Fewer than 100, I'm sure. And chapter 1 was finished. It was pretty much done. And it remains done. And this happened in mid-November, I want to say, somewhere in there. Finished. And then I thought, okay, I've purchased the Wazard asked how the table read is. It's edited, but I've still got a bunch of stuff I need to insert into it. So I ordered a much better motion capture suit than the one that you can see here. And there was a 3-month delivery delay. So I said, I can't wait 3 months. So then 2 or 3 months go by. And then after deciding I couldn't wait for 3 months, I ordered it, which meant another 3 months. And again, I'll keep this brief. Because every single motion in that animation had to be built out of existing animations and had to constantly just move things around just a little bit to get the... Because if I've got some guy who swings a sword, bends down, and then stands up and waves, I got to find, 4 or 5 animations for that, and I got to put them together in such a way. So I was worried about that actually political animal, but it turns out it's not. It's not lying in a culvert someplace downtown, ripped out of a Union Pacific train. So that was the part that was so time consuming and essentially just soul destroying in terms of like, oh my God, this is so tedious. Now with the new suit and the new software, by the way, which is really, really good at locking the feet down and stuff. Now all I have to do is say, all right, I can look in Unreal and say I've got to walk forward for. I'm just going to have to swallow it and deal with it now. And I have to walk forward for 1.5 meters, and then I'll have to make a left turn and then walk another 2 meters. That's what I see on the little squares in Unreal. I come into the studio, I mark it out with a yardstick, close enough, and then I simply record it and I drop it on the scene and it's done. Ta-da! So anyway, I got an email in December, which went with the rest of all those emails that came in December. But after I got well enough to read, because frankly, clicking things was just too exhausting. I got a message from this company saying, because the whole thing was due to supply chain shortages of chips and stuff. Okay, it's going to ship in the first week in January, and you should be seeing it soon. I thought, aces. So after the end of the first week in January, I'm going home like a kid, was waiting for his Polaris submarine to come from Boy's Life, looking for this package, no sign of it. So I finally emailed them, the people who sent out the, hey, it'll be here soon, and get no response from them. Then I talked to a customer service rep who had asked a lot of questions about it, and she said, it looks like it's not going to be there till end of February. And I said back, that's a tough pill to swallow, because I've basically been putting this thing on hold, waiting for this stuff to arrive. Then I got a second email from the original people who said, no, we think it's going out end of January. In any event, it's not here, and it'll be a little bit. So I'm going to get back on that, but that's why you haven't really seen much in the way of development. It's just I've been waiting for this thing, and it's supposed to have been here by now. And they told me it would be here by now. But it may be as late as the end of February. And when I wrote them back, I said, okay, look, I understand all this. Not happy about it, but I understand it. How firm are you on the end of February? Because a month ago you told me first week in January, the company did. I said, we got the units. We're packing them and shipping them in order. Okay. So things will change then. And one of the things that I really want to do first is this whole live streaming thing where it's doing facial motion capture and gloves and the body. And I can just be I don't know why I can't shake the idea of doing stuff as an astronaut, driving a rover on the moon. I don't know, maybe because that's easy to do. That'll do it for the pre-question part of our show. Now, when I made the announcement on Facebook, I said, and questions will be answered and the peasants will become less revolting. There's stacks of questions, didn't answer any of them last week. Trying to catch you guys up on what, true tales of adventure I've been through. So what we'll do is we'll go to BillWhittle.com first. We'll knock those down. And depending on what time it is after that, we will do Facebook questions, but I'm sure we'll be able to get to some of them anyway. So, and by the way, I'm going to take Natasha's advice and the advice of many other people who have been, happy birthday to Buzz Aldrin, political animal reminded me, 92 years old. All the moonwalkers died of old age. Who? I bet they wouldn't have believed me if I told them that. Anyway, I'm going to take Natasha's advice and the advice of several other people, and I'm going to force myself, if I can, to punch through these things, because I always feel like, if I take a question, I've got to have a, 15, 20-minute answer. And then I realized, no, actually, people just want to hear their question answered. So we will see. Here's a post that says, Bill, Steve, Scott, Bueller. Let's just see if that's a question or... Okay, here we go. Looks like this is just one, and then we have the actual question thing. So this is from Ronnie Rowe. Bill, I joined months ago because I wanted to ask a question, but for one reason or another, it wasn't member time, wasn't gotten to, or something else. I'm first of all, I'm Rodney Rowe. I'm genuinely sorry about that. It's the nature of the Stratosphere Lounge to meander itself into oblivion. So apologies there. Now, what I would like to know is, why do you not do a weekly stream where people can ask questions through Super Chats? I know I would gladly donate $5 to $10 to get a 30-second response to a question. Don't give me ideas, man. Actually, you know what? Give me ideas, man. That way we could get the interaction that is desperately missing from the channel, and we can further support the show. I would love to have Scott and Steve on a rotation hosting weekly live as well. You can use Streamlabs or Entropy if you don't want to give Susan a cut of the chats. Do you all have too much money already, or just you don't like the idea of super chats? Love you all, Steph. Thanks. Well, I've been asked many questions on this show over the course of the years, and I think, do we all have too much money here at BillWhittle.com? It's probably the easiest one I've ever had to answer. On reflection, Rodney, I would say, yeah, I think it's reasonable for me to say at this point to leap to this. No, we don't have too much money here. On the contrary. So a lot of people in the comment section live are going, yeah, more live streams. Okay. Now, the Super Chat stuff that I've seen, I certainly saw it on the Friday night show with Doomcock, and I may have seen it on the live show with Gary at Nerdrotic, but I know I've seen it at Doomcock. And I imagine that's done through YouTube. So maybe it's time to stream these things through YouTube. I don't know. I think what we could certainly do is we could stream them on YouTube and then, archive them on a separate. I'm recording this show on two different things now. I always record everything twice, simultaneously, in case one of them goes out. But yeah, and another thing that people have been. I'm not trying to take credit for this. On the contrary, I'm taking culpability for this. A number of people have been saying, hey, man, you really need to look into local.com, where people pay to talk to you, which I would have done that a long time ago if the idea didn't seem so kind of nuts to me. So we'll see. Political Animal says, guys like Doomcock and Critical Drinker make crazy money on live stream, but then questions become kind of pay to play, and the members are already paying. Now, that is an excellent point, and to be perfectly honest with you, that is basically been my attitude. Just to clear this up, and then we'll move on. Imagine. And I'm just going to increase the exposure. I feel still a little dark. It's a little much, maybe. It's better. Just to clear this up, I have this, as far as Stratosphere Lounge only is concerned, I've got these two conflicting things working. One of them is, without question, the members deserve something for their money in addition to the shows, and access and things like that, having their questions answered first, the forum and so on, are the least we could do. It's the members who told us that they didn't want to have a members-only right angle. We, for years, did a backstage show for members, and then we did 4 shows. Each one of us brought a show, and then we rotated, and one of us brought 2. And for years, that was a members-only show until finally the members just wrote enough. So these are actually good episodes. You should release them to the public. That's what we're paying for. So that kind of generosity just blew me away. But back to Stratosphere Lounge. So here's the problem. On one hand, yes, absolutely, I should be doing the members' questions first because they're paying to keep the lights on. That's not just, it's not even like buying first class ticket. That's like, this is how you pay for the, you got to pay the guys doing the dry cleaning if you want your dry cleaning done. So there's that. But on the other hand, and this is why I guess I've always been kind of so blurry about this. On the other hand, this show precedes, if it doesn't precede the membership, then it's awful close to it, and has been a Facebook question thing. And so I since it already was that, I didn't want to make it, now it's only members only that can ask questions on the Stratosphere Lounge, because from the very beginning it was people who just didn't want to do it on Facebook. Now, Wizard13 says Drinker does a second stream he calls Open Bar to catch up on Super Chats. That's how he balances it. And furthermore, he's got at least one other channel after Drinker, After Hours, and so on. A lot of guys have second channels. I was on the verge of opening up that second channel, and all of the Unreal Engine stuff, all of the pop culture stuff I was going to put there. And then, we got sick and stuff. So that's not only in the pipeline, that's pretty much immediate. Look, I think one more, this is Thursday. We record these on Thursday. Today's the 20th. I think by next week, it's not that I wasn't feeling healthy enough to go ahead and release the chapter 1 of the animation, at least to the members. It's that this thing takes so much of your mental energy. It just drags you down, just tired all the time. So in any event, we will do that. And I will look more specifically into Super Chats, because to my utter amazement, the reaction in the comment section live, and most of you watch us on YouTube, but we love to have our regular crowd here live, and they're all saying, do the Super Chat stuff. So I suppose that's what I will do, by gum. And I'll probably register on Local Doubt, as well. I'll tell you one thing, if I do, and I probably will, as I say, go to Local, where the only thing I can promise you is I can't promise you that you will get your money's worth, but I can promise you that you will get a lot of my time. Because there you go. Tiki Rocket says live, everyone here, Bill included, needs to listen to the Ruthless podcast from today. I don't know what that is. Wazard said, Bill, my father got the first COVID strain, which was the worst one, during his 6th cancer while recovering from surgery, and survived, and his comment on it was, COVID, get in line. Wizard, it's guys like your father who made this a great country, and by God, we owe them better than what we delivered. All right, here we go. So now we're going to the Stratosphere Lounge questions. This seems like a fair balance to me. I'm going to just move through, get as many questions as I can, and I'll do the BillWhittle.com questions first, and then we'll go to Facebook, and if we can get them all, great. If not, then maybe super chat time. By the way, and Natasha pointed this out to me. I really love doing this show. I really do. It's certainly the most fun I have during the week. And the one thing she pointed out to me was a lot of times, especially since we got sick, it's like I came home after we did Virtue Signal. I come in the morning on Thursdays and do a couple shows, or then I usually just prep them, go home, take a nap for an hour and a half, come back. And it's been tough to get in here, but Natasha pointed out to me that when I do the Stratosphere Lounge, when I come home from doing the Stratosphere Lounge, I am chipper and happy, and she's absolutely right. So there we go. So I could certainly see myself doing more of these things live. I don't know if they'd all be. By the way, I thought also. I actually thought about naming the second channel the Stratosphere Lounge. So maybe I do a channel called the Stratosphere Lounge that's nothing but Stratosphere Lounges. So I have, I don't know, 3 or 4 channels. Who knows? It's not a bad idea. I just like the sound of it. I've always liked the sound of it. All right, moving on. Here we go. So 01-2022 Stratosphere Lounge questions. I know I missed a bunch when I was sick. I can't go backwards and forwards at the same time. So forgive me if I missed you, but here we go. All right. I saw people talking about this earlier before we started the show. This is from Henry Lumley, who is a reputable Fortunite and a 5-star member. Joined a year ago. Thank you, Henry. Thank you for sticking it out. And here's his question. Space junk thought. I was thinking about space junk. We were thinking about space junk all wrong. It's not junk. It's incredibly valuable mass made of precious metals that is currently in orbit. Let's just stop right there and say I've never heard anybody put it that way. But by golly, that is bloody brilliant. See, this is the power of language, right? This is the power of language. This is the power of words like sanctuary cities instead of, instead of like holdouts for illegal aliens. This is the power of language. We've always called it space junk, but you're absolutely right. It's not junk. It's some of the most expensive stuff we make. Let's continue. We've paid a huge price to put that mass in orbit. To just throw it into the atmosphere to be melted down and never recovered would be a costly mistake. I wonder how much space hardware is at the bottom of the Indian Ocean. That's where America usually deorbits stuff. And the Russians and a bunch of others deorbit their stuff, and it hits a point that's just west of South America. Our goal should be to deorbit and should not be to deorbit and lose that valuable material, but to collect and reprocess it in orbit. We need a way to take old and unusable satellite components and melt them if necessary, separate out the component materials, and create material filaments that could be used in an orbiting printer. We have a gold mine orbiting our planet already. We need a way to figure out a way to mine it. 9,700 tons times $5,000 per kilogram comes to a whopping 48,500,000, one more time, $48,500,000,000. That's what's in orbit now. We should probably figure out a way to make some of that money back. First of all, Henry, if you're watching the show live, and even if you're watching it on YouTube, just turn it off right now and get in touch with Elon Musk immediately. I have never, ever heard that argument made, and I will never think about the stuff that's in orbit the same way again, specifically because of that one comment. That is a profoundly insightful comment. The problem with, we did a couple, I don't know what it was, it might have been I think, wasn't it going to Mars is stupid right angle we did a week or two ago? And the question was, well, there was an editorial a guy wrote that said the going to Mars is stupid, and I thought, oh great, here's another hippie talking about we should spend the money on free flat screen TVs for the poor. But he was saying, no, the moon base is a better investment. And my response was, well, fortunately, it's not an either or. However, if I had a limited pot of money, and Scott came right up and said, yeah, that's the problem. There's no such thing as a limited pot of money. No limited pie will make as much pies as you need, as many pies as you need. So I said, if I had a limited pot of money, I'd do the lunar moon base before I'd do the Mars mission, because that makes the Mars mission much easier. And furthermore, Elon Musk isn't talking about going to Mars, planting a flag, and then coming back, which was what Mars missions always were prior to Elon Musk, pretty much that. The scale. I know people have that people have a lot of problems with Elon Musk, and there are many things about Elon Musk that you could have, in fact, a problem with. But I am a big fan of the guy, as obvious by now, and I'm prefacing all of this by saying I know I'm a Elon Musk groupie. But with that said, the scale of his vision is the most impressive thing about Elon Musk. It's not his persistence. It's not his genius. It's not his ability to figure out not only what technologies are needed, but how to sell them, how to make them interesting, how to make them fun. The scale of his vision is his most amazing aspect, because when he talks about 50,000 Starship launches, or 15, I guess it was. I think I got that number wrong, but still, I think it's 15,000 launches to get to Mars. And when you think about the pace of what the last 40 years of space exploration has been, 50 years, then you realize the size of what is necessary to really go and not come back. It's 15,000 launches. It's an impossible number. And you say it's an impossible number until you see the chopsticks at Boca Chica, where the thing is already built. They're going to start catching first stages. And he's talking about having a line of second stages, and just basically the first stage comes down, got it, yep, move it over here, fuel the son of a gun, here's the new one on top while we're fueling it, send it up again. Turnaround time, he said, an hour. Now that is the kind of visionary that actually changes the world, and that term is overused, Henry, change the world. That's the kind of vision, and it's being backed up by not just computer graphics gang, that not changes the world in the terms of, wow, we have a better refrigerator now. It changes our society into a spacefaring society. That's what it's going to take. I have to get this out. I don't think I've ever talked about it before, but me personally, I just hate the way the Starship looks. I just hate it. Hate it. And there's a simple reason for why I hate the way the Starship looks. Very simple. And that is that every single bad science fiction movie I ever saw in my life before we actually got into space looked like the Starship. Silver rocket that sits on its tail, and it's got the thing in the windows. And I cannot help the feeling that it looks like we're going to Mars, but we're going in 1948. But anyway, some people think it's gorgeous. I do like the steering vanes on the top. Looks kind of like a canard, and I like canards because canards are awesome, right, Bert? So anyway, there we go. And Political Animal says it's aerodynamic. It's all of those things, and I think it's just probably like everything else. Elon Musk thought it'd be kind of cool if it looked that way. Dave Big Booty says my dad was a huge fan of Flash Gordon and Tom Corbett, and he loved watching the rockets land like the shows that he watched as a kid. I remember being heavily influenced by Tintin Goes to the Moon. Tintin is not something that had big presence here in America, but I read it in England, and it's a French cartoon, and it was very realistically drawn, and I thought, there you go. But yeah, to me, it just doesn't look real. It doesn't look serious. And whenever I see these fleets of starships going to Mars or whatever, I just think it strikes me as an incredible lack of imagination, but it's precisely the opposite. It's a tremendous leap of imagination. And one final thing I'll say about this is, if you've ever seen the Flash Gordon serials where they're steering the spaceships with, the levers like this, when you look at how ridiculous that is, I realized many, many years ago that when I get a chance to do hardcore science fiction and make it as realistically believable as possible, when it's all said and done, if this ever happens, my version will look just as ridiculous as the Flash Gordon version will. We haven't got the faintest idea of what that's actually going to look like. And the Starship is a great example of that. So that's an excellent point, Henry. I never ever thought of it before, and I will continue to think of it that way. Now, you mentioned space junk and people in the comments section earlier, so I'm going to elaborate just a little bit, but I'm going to keep going and move through these things. We are, I'm just trying to think this through. Losing access to outer space is something that could happen in an hour. And when I say losing access for outer space, I mean forever, for centuries. I forget the name of it. It's not the Cardinal line. It's something or other. But it basically was called the Cascade. We've talked about it before on the show, and here's how it works. If one satellite collides with another satellite now, dead or alive satellite, probably dead because you can move, or living satellites, you can change orbits, then it's like a shotgun blast, and then that blast goes out, the Kepler syndrome, thank you, bag of Sprite. Then all of those pieces from the two crashed satellites go out there, and then they hit other pieces of satellites, and then they shatter, and it's very, Kessler, yeah, and it's very much like, thank you, it's very much like you got a room full of, when they were showing how a nuclear chain reaction worked back on Disney, when people were terrified of things, they would take an empty room, fill them full of mouse traps, put a ping pong ball on the arm of the mousetrap, and they would take one ping pong ball and toss it into the room, and that would land on one of the mouse traps, and that would send that ping pong ball going, and it would land on one or two others, and the next thing you know, the room just goes pop, 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 done. So this is what we're in danger of. Kessler, or Kepler, whatever it is, that syndrome. So we could lose access to outer space with a chain reaction, and that chain reaction could be happening right now. And the reason it took me a minute to think about this is I was thinking, is there anything that catastrophic that could come without any warning really at all? Now, I couldn't think of anything. Our power grid is susceptible, but, you've got a buildup to war, EMP pulse, solar flare, all of that stuff. A solar flare that took out a lot of the world's electronics would be catastrophic, but it wouldn't be anything like as bad as this. And to me, this is a great example of us this is exactly what happened with Challenger. It's exactly what happened with Columbia. We know it's a problem. We're fully aware it's a problem. We know it's a fatal problem, that it is not just a little problem, that the consequences of failure are monumental. And yet we're going to go through every single day pretending like it doesn't happen. We start cleaning this stuff up now, these space resources, because I'm not calling them space junk anymore, thanks to Henry Lumley. If we start cleaning up these space resources now, then I was talking earlier about rather have the moon base. The problem, 3D printing is essentially solves everything except for the problem of what do you put into the printer? What are you using as a raw material for this thing to print? And if you're on the lunar surface, you've got the lunar regolith. You just got the rocks and the dirt and make stuff out of that. But in orbit around the Earth, where would your raw materials be? Would you have to raise them? Isn't that kind of defeating the point? And Henry's point is, no, solve both problems together. Not only do you clean up the orbital space around the Earth and dramatically lower the chance of this catastrophic event, but you use it to print new stuff. Maybe you use it to print new spaceships to go collect more of this stuff. I think that's really it. It's and Helios says I've underestimated what a major solar flare CME coronal mass ejection would be. Fair enough, but a coronal mass ejection that did that much damage to the Earth would be catastrophic and may take a long time to recover from, but it would be recoverable because we would be working here on the ground, right? If this cascade effect happens in Earth orbit, you can't get up there to clean it up. This is the thing that is really keeps me up at night, is that, we are one mistake, or not even a mistake, because the Chinese and the Russians have done this intentionally with when they're testing out their anti-satellite weapons. you can do that relatively safely if you decide to hit a satellite that's just, a couple of weeks away from re-entering the atmosphere anyway. But we are one roll of the dice away from losing space forever. And once it's gone, you're talking about it being gone for a long time. So yes, Henry, why don't we just go and use this and take advantage of it and not have it be another one of those things where, well, did you see this coming? Oh yeah, saw this coming for 50 years. All right, yep. By the way, you may not know this, but pretty much half of the stuff that's in orbit are just upper stages of boosters. If you forget about staging, if you launch a rocket from Earth, it's got a satellite on the top, right? Let's just say for the sake of the argument, it's the second stage that gets into orbit. If you do that, and you do your 8-minute burn like Columbia or like the shuttle, 8.5 minutes to orbit, your orbit starts at the Kennedy Space Center, goes around, and ends at the Kennedy Space Center. It doesn't end above the Kennedy Space Center, ends at the Kennedy Space Center. That's what an orbital burn does. It gets you up into orbit, around, and then it brings you back to its starting point, which is on the ground at the Kennedy Space Center. So now, what has to happen is you got to go halfway, and then you fire that rocket again, and that circularizes the orbit, and then you're good to go. But most of the stuff that's up there that's not working is just boosters. And that's, as Henry pointed out, that's aluminum, probably a fair amount of titanium, all kinds of cool stuff. Moving on, because we're going to cover questions today. Rodney Rose says, Bill, I joined months ago because I wanted to ask a question, but for one reason or another, is that what I just answered? Oh, sorry, that was a super chat question, yes. So we're back to Henry Lumley again. Breaking the eternal bureaucracy. And this is a long question here. I was thinking about the idea of the government and its various bureaucracies today. Like any monopoly without competition, they always start to abuse power, become slow to innovate, slow to change, and arrogant in their position, precisely. So how do we give government competition? The party system can only inject so much competition into the government. Let me interrupt this excellent question by saying, if you haven't seen my latest Moving Back to America called Cerberus, it would be a good time to see it right after this, because the entire theme of Cerberus is that somewhere during the last couple years, big business and big government decided we've been fighting each other forever. What if we work together? What if big government is no longer telling big pharma that you can't put this to market? What if big government says to big pharma, we're going to require people to buy your product. We're going to use the force of law. You're going to be legally required to buy your product. So it's one of the better shows I've done, I think, ever. That's Cerberus. And it's up now on BillWhittle.com and also on YouTube and so on. Excuse me. So the party system can only inject so much competition into government. Most of that is for campaign promises that neither side intends on keeping. And with the regulatory state and the eternal bureaucracy, even the competition of the parties is nullified. We have a left-wing administrative state that intentionally undercuts and slow walks the will of the people when they do not agree with the decisions of the electorate, just stating the obvious to get us all on the same page. Okay. And I'm going to paraphrase just a little bit here, but basically what he's saying is that it used to be that, well, this is a direct quote, it used to be a norm that when the government changed hands in an election, the administrative state also changed hands. And this was done away with to the disadvantage of the country. So how do we return to a slightly modified version of that idea? When Ulysses Grant, for example, became president and was inaugurated, Grant moved into the White House, and every single one of the people who had been not only in Andrew Johnson's cabinet, but the entire bureaucracy of Washington, you're all fired. You're all a bunch of losers. That's why we ran against you and won. You're all gone. So that the entire bureaucracy would change. And that was good for the country because it's this immortal bureaucracy that is essentially what the so-called shadow government is. It's a group of elitists who've been in Washington through 5, 6, 7 administrations, don't care what the voters have to say, already figured out they know how to do things better than they do, although if you look at their track record outside of the Beltway, it's not as impressive as they might want you to believe. And so they basically change the will of the people incrementally, like vines growing over an ivy wall. Right? No, we don't like that, so we'll slow that down. We do like this, so we'll speed this up. I talked to an Arizona state senator, legislator anyway, many years ago, who said that he wrote a bill handed it over to his aides to clean up the language. And when he saw it, just before he voted on it, because bills are ridiculously long anyway, and read it, he realized that the aide had inverted what the bill was supposed to do. Yep. So there you go. So far so good, Henry. I think the president should come in with his guys, and I think if it turns out that your friend has run a business and you want to make him Treasury Secretary, I'm in favor of that. And frankly, if it turns out that his nephew was, the guy who did the bookkeeping, you want to make him, the Assistant Secretary, great. Anything's better than what we have now. There's nobody less competent than career politicians. And that's why they want to stay career politicians, because they know it. Okay, so moving on. So you used to be able to just dump the bureaucracy. And now the government, of course, is so complex that it's almost like you couldn't do that, but I refuse to believe that. It's just, that's what got us in this trouble. I can't do that. Okay. So now he says, one possibility is that we try to create a situation where the government bureaucrats are cycled out with the party of their affiliation. So in this situation, you would have the head of the local DMV as a registered Democrat. The Democrats lose an election, state or federal. Now the incoming new head of the DMV office is a registered Republican on an individually signed 4-year term limited contract till the next election, with the ability to be retained if the affiliated party wins. Henry, you're pushing hard for having two of the best ideas I ever heard in one episode. So as a result, the bureaucrats at every level are cycled back into the real world regularly, and a bad government employee doesn't stay long enough to build up these endless pensions and lifelong benefits packages, or the career connections to make things go faster or slower either, for that matter. Term limits to 12 years for all federal employees, and no going on welfare in between elections either. So how does this increase competition? Well, what it is, if this reset in government employees also came with a reset in regulations, so there would be a Republican set and a Democratic set of regulations. Obviously, for some of the regulations, this would be harder than others. However, I think that over time, people would begin to see which party provides less intrusive government and would vote for that. As well, the parties would really have to start competing and differentiating themselves. No more of this uniparty crap. If every time the Republicans took office, there was suddenly half the regulations you had under Democrats, and the staff at the DMV was actually helpful, attentive, and efficient, do you think that would not get through to the voters? Now, the other part of this plan would really show the Democrats how unpopular their policies and regulations are with the voting public. If the Democrats had to own every bad decision and policy all the way down to the local level and cannot point to a policy that they inherited from the last guy, what are they going to hide behind? I think this would drag both policy and regulation into the political middle and force the administrative state to shrink. Let me go to there's a lot to unpack there, more than I have time for because I have other questions to answer right now, but I'll be thinking about this a lot. But let's unpack the basic idea here. When you change the majority political party of the legislature of that state, you change the bureaucracy of the state as well. That if Republicans could somehow capture the California legislature, then every single person working for the state of California would eventually be, and eventually I mean shortly, be replaced by a Republican. And then if the Democrats took it back, then they could hire the old guys back if they wanted to, but this would be a way to flush things out. That's a really, really good idea. Because so many of our problems are caused by unelected people. And another major problem, which I would go after first, frankly, is not only are so many of our problems caused by unelected people, but actually the majority of our problems are caused by people who are elected using powers that they were never given. Ever. Never meant to have and never given. Executive orders are the worst thing that's happened to this country in my lifetime. I'd never heard the term before. Well, certainly, I can't remember hearing it before Obama, but I'm sure I must have heard it during the Bush administration, but I have no memory of executive orders. Executive order is dictatorship. If you say, I'm the president, we've decided we're going to do this. Well, what about Congress? Well, to hell with Congress. It's an executive order. Executive orders need to immediately disappear. They got to go. And if I was president, the first thing I'd do is sign an executive order voiding all executive orders and basically saying there shall be no more executive orders. And if we need to amend the Constitution to state that, then see, we don't need to amend the Constitution. We just need to listen to it, just have to follow it. But anyway, there has to be some way to dynamite loose the lifetime parasites that have infected the American political system. One of the best things I ever heard about America and American politics was that in every other country in the world, this is prior to Barack Obama now, in every other country in the world, the capital city is the biggest city in that country. London, obviously, Paris and Berlin and so on. But in America, Washington wasn't even in the top 5 or 10, not only in population, it just, New York was where the money was, Los Angeles was where entertainment was, and aerospace and so on, and Houston was where the energy was, and all the rest of it. It was Washington was always kind of a almost like an appendage, that orbited the important stuff, because we weren't politicizing everything. One way to fix this problem, Henry, attacking it from a different direction, is to, and this is more of a cultural issue, which is really our job, is to make an effort to depoliticize as much of our life as possible. In other words, you could try to change the bureaucracy because the bureaucracy has this control over your life, but if you could eliminate the things that they had control over, it would function essentially the same way. It would help to get rid of them because you'd make them weaker. It used to be if you were a Republican or a Democrat, it's because one of you believed in a 12% tariff and the other one believed in a 4% tariff. That was basically it. It wasn't a question of which bathroom you use. It wasn't a question of any of that stuff. It was just two different flavors of how to do the same thing. But since the progressives took over, and really I'm talking about 120 years ago now we're going to tell the American people you can't come home and have a beer. What? Yeah, we're going to pass an amendment. Really? You're going to pass an amendment, prohibition, to take away freedoms from America. Yep, we're progressives and that's what we do. Okay? You can probably cut the connections between your life and government not only more easily, but also more effectively, the closer to the local level you possibly can get. And I am somewhat encouraged, in fact, I'm considerably encouraged by the reaction that we're seeing now with school boards across the country, and especially the reaction of the people on the school boards and the teachers' unions to parents suddenly realizing, hey, they've been putting stuff in your kids' heads. Well, we've been telling you this for 3 generations now, but I'm glad, better late than never. That kind of thing is where I think the actual solution is, because that doesn't require massive social shift. It just requires an individual doing something different. If you homeschool your kids, or of all the things that this country really needs, and there's so much money in this, but right now, the greatest single need in this country, I think, and I'm talking now as a businessman regarding a market, is that there needs to be an alternative to public schools that basically does what public schools are supposed to do, and that is not only educate your kids, but get them out of your parents' hair as well. You can't ask parents to become teachers on top. It's not feasible. So if I was really looking for something to be the big smash society open kind of thing, I wouldn't go into electric cars or solar power or anything. I'd find a way to educate children independently of letting the government do it, and I would insist upon the socialization aspect of being in person. This is not a Zoom call thing. We're already finding, I'm not talking about homeschooling now because homeschoolers often have social events that go with it, but more and more evidence comes out every day that the year and a half that young people have been deprived of their company of each other at this critical point in their lives where they're supposed to be making friendships, we're going to see the result of this as a social pathology for generations. But there needs to be something out there that's uniform, standard. There needs to be a McDonald's of homeschooling, is what I'm saying. And there also needs to be a Burger King of homeschooling, and ideally a Chick-fil-A of homeschooling, so that you get choice, competition, all of that stuff, which is good, but at the same time, something that's recognized. So you don't have to go out and find your own chemistry teacher, right? That's what I would be doing right now. I would be putting together educational franchises, private educational franchises. That's actually a damn good idea. That's exactly how to think of it. I would be putting out the McDonald's of homeschooling. Yeah, pay us. Come on, bring your kids over. Here's our building, and we'll put them out and we'll exercise them and play football and baseball and all the rest of it. And when they go to school, they're going to learn mathematics and science and biology and all the rest of it, history. And they're not going to learn any politics. If you hear a political word, your children are not only allowed to, but we encourage that they record every single session so that if a political opinion is uttered in a biology class, we can discipline that teacher. And if that teacher continues to do it, then we fire that teacher because they're there to get biology, not politics. That's what I would do. I would just open it up. Bob Neef says classical education, formerly known as education. Exactly, Bob. It's not a mystery to me. I'm not joking when I say that if I had a classroom that consisted of 30 kids under a tree, and I had a slate and a piece of chalk, I could educate those kids to orders of magnitude past what you could do with the newest computer labs and all the rest of the stuff they spend money on. Easily. Education is everything, and as we fall behind on education, fewer engineers, all the rest of it. And I'm going to try and figure out a way to keep moving on and getting these questions. But again, Henry, 2 ideas, just amazing. Here we go. We're still in Bill.com. Hey, look at that captain on the bridge. Welcome back, Bill. Glad to hear you're feeling better. It's from Marusha Dark, who I don't think is with us tonight, but in any event, hello. Feel free to skip this if you're already talking about it during the stream and to plead out of anything too personal, but I was wondering if you could share a bit about your experience with the Wuhan flu and whether it's had any impact on your views about the virus itself or our collective response to it. Also, how did Natasha handle it in comparison to you? P.S. Steve Scott and Zoe did a great job holding down the fort while you were away. You'll be relieved to know that I'm not going to answer this question. I looked at the date on it. It's January 13th, 2022. The entire last Stratosphere Lounge was about that. So I imagine you've seen that by now, and so I'm just going to consider this question obsolete. Natasha handled it about as well as I did. She didn't have the sore throat or the cough to deal with, which for me was the worst of it. But she was very, very sick. And we not only took care of each other, we had a couple of friends came over and took care of us. It really was a question there for a week or two when it was like, if something had to happen, like we need to get some water, I'm thirsty, I'm thirsty too. Who wants to go? For what I remember of it, there was a week or two there where we basically just said, who feels the least awful? Well, I guess I do. Although mostly it was her, because she's a champ. Henry Lumley again. Hey, Bill, welcome back. Just wanted to get an update on the new launch date for the Assault on the DNC Castle animation. Figured being down a couple of weeks would delayed the whole thing, so I think we're all wondering what you expect a new launch date to be. Also, with your expanded experience with Unreal, do you expect that your projects will progress at a greater pace? Once again, I'm going to declare this one obsolete only because we talked about that at the very beginning before I saw the question. Hopefully that answered your question on that. Marusha Dark, your video on the psychology of anti-vaxxers reminded me of the fact that I'd heard about the American Revolution. Reminded me of this fact I'd heard about the American Revolution, wherein supposedly only 1/3 of the colonists actually fought for freedom, another third were British loyalists, and the remaining third were ambivalent and content to side with whoever won. Maybe that's ultimately apocryphal, but given what I know about human psychology and how personality traits such as agreeableness or neuroticism exist on a bell curve, I'd be willing to bet the same distribution maps holds to just about every other facet of society as well. The result being that for any political issue, you have 1/3 of people preferring one side, 1/3 of people preferring the opposing side, and 1/3 who can go either way. For existence, pro-vax, anti-vax, and people who just follow whatever the herd around them does. 1/3 are courageous, 1/3 neurotic, and 1/3 somewhere in between, etc. We know that personality has a genetic component to it, how much is debatable, meaning that some people firmly on one side will never leave that side, and each side has a trade-off of good and bad qualities. Those in the middle can either be won over or ignored to shift the balance of power. My question to you is, which do you think is more fruitful from a tactical perspective? Trying to win over the moderate middle in order to swell our ranks, or ignoring them and simply focusing on neutralizing those dangerous actors on the other side, or perhaps even both? Yet another great question. This is a no-brainer. We spend so much time arguing with people that are never going to come around to our point of view because they are not capable of our point of view. It's pithier than I expected especially from the Stratosphere Lounge. They're not capable of it. Marusha, they don't. You mentioned a lot of this is genetic. If you're a person who is, let's just say for the sake of the argument, a hypochondriac and a germaphobe, you are not going to be convinced that you don't need the vaccine, put the masks away, it's all, just get it, survive it. You're never going to convince those people. And likewise, if you're a person who's consumed by envy and who feels entitled that the world has been shafting them for their entire lives, otherwise they'd have the nice car, you're never going to change those people either. You're not going to get them to suddenly realize that the people who have all the nice stuff, as a general rule, worked harder for it. I mentioned the shows that we did today with Zoe, which haven't been released yet, the 2 virtue signals. I mentioned on that show that the problem is not finding cool things to talk about. The problem is finding virtues. If we called it the vice signal, we'd be in business forever. But because I put a title on the show, I have to think of a new way to kind of package this. I said it was like, imagine we did a right angle called COVID-19, and that was it, So I decided, just for the sake of it, just to set up the conversation. We did one show called Rich Man, Poor Man. We did another show called Beggar Man, Thief. And in Rich Man, Poor Man, I said, I've known millionaires. I've known a number of millionaires. I'm friends with a number of millionaires. And I've met a few billionaires, and they're different people. But not only were every millionaire that I know became a millionaire without that being their primary motivation. I don't know a single millionaire whose reason for doing what they did in order to become millionaires was, I want to be rich. I don't know a millionaire like that. I don't even know if they exist. Billionaires are different. That's about accumulation. But the millionaires I know, and I think millionaires are the best people I ever met, and billionaires may be the worst or second worst. The millionaires I know did it because they had a burning desire to do something that they wanted to do, and as it turned out, that provided value that wasn't there before, and people paid them money. So I also said the second thing I know about millionaires, the ones that I know personally, are they the hardest working individuals I've ever seen, and I'm not sure I want to work that hard. Turns out I do, and I just am missing some kind of chromosome that they have. And let me just get into that for a second. The reason that I am not a millionaire myself, and am unlikely to become one unless I can find a really good manager, is because my mind is very, very, it's not disorganized, but it's certainly not it's fluid. I think that's probably the best way to put it. It's not a question of concentration, because if I have a specific problem to solve, I'll sit there and stare at it for 27 hours till I beat it. But my mind is not wired in such a way so that I continue to execute the steps that need to be executed on a regular basis. I'm just not built that way. The reason that I'm good at what I do and the reason that I'm bad at what I do is because the pieces are constantly changing position and trying to find new ways to combine. And that means that organizational follow through and all the things that the people who I know who are millionaires get right, I don't want to say I can't do it. Yeah, that's fair. I can't do it. It's not that I'm not smart enough. It's not that I don't know how. I just can't do it. I just don't have I just don't. This is not the first time this has happened. It's not only common, but it's essentially mythological. The story of an actor who becomes a multimillionaire and his agent steals all his money from him. Because what makes you a good actor, as a general rule, doesn't make you a good accountant. And that's kind of where that whole thing sits. So my point is, to answer your question, we all respond to the one third that is vocally opposed to us because that's the third that's making the noise. But you are 100% correct. We should not only not be fighting those people, we should be actively ignoring them and going entirely at the movable one third. Because I completely agree with what you're saying, and basically been saying the same thing for decades now. One third of the country thinks one thing, one third of the country thinks another, and the middle moves. And the middle will move in the direction of who's telling the best story. Not who's presenting the best facts, who's telling the best story. And we're miserable at that. Fortunately, the factual foundations of life on Earth support our position. Because if it were just storytelling, there'd be 7 of us. This is why this company is here. The ideas that we call conservative today are ideas that work. And because they're ideas that work, the people that are attracted to them are practical people. And practical people are not terribly good at what Evan Sayek calls rhetorical intelligence. Therein is our problem. And here's where I come into the picture as an individual. I have a very unusual background. Best way to put it is, I've mentioned it once or twice before. When I was in college, I did all of the science homework for my artist friends and all of the humanities homework for my science friends. I live in both of those worlds. I'm an instrument-rated pilot who's flown experimental airplanes, and I know what a good color palette is. You don't often find that combination, and that's where my uniqueness is. The essay I wrote on Silent America called Tribes, where there was a gray tribe of engineers and a pink tribe of, entertainers. I'm actually both. And that gives me a real advantage, because it means that on an intellectual level, I can understand where the conservative argument is coming from. I can understand the engineering of common sense. And on an emotional level, I can, when I'm on my game, which is most of the time, I can turn that practical data into an emotional appeal that makes people go, oh, wow. I saw a number of comments about that in regard to Cerberus. In fact, the leading comment on YouTube when I saw it last was, Bill, you have a really uncanny ability to take things that we've all been kind of thinking about and put it in a concrete form that we can all now immediately see the relationship that's just been kind of vaguely in our head. That's a valuable skill, and we are doing essentially none of this for the middle. The middle can be convinced. The fact that there's been a 12, 14 point shift in Republican Party versus Democratic Party preference in the last year wasn't due to me being out there changing people's minds. It's due to the fact that the middle will move. And when they voted for Democrat, they said, oh, Joe Biden's a great guy, and he's experienced, and he's kind, and he's wonderful. A lot of people believed that, and they voted for him. They didn't know any better. Or they had hopes. Well, significant numbers of those people have now looked at reality and realized, nope. So if we could learn to tell better stories, we'd wipe them out, because we have the foundations. The reason it's a 50-50 game, more or less, is an indication of how close to the truth we are, because when it comes to selling that truth, we're so miserable that if the truth weren't on our side, we'd be gone. So there you go. Yes, go for the middle. You will not change the other people's mind. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of time. I think it was Phil Trick who said this. I hope you're watching. Phil, I know you're watching. If you're not watching it live, you're watching there. So, I think it was Phil. I got all upset about something when I was a kid working in the planetarium, 13, 14 years old. And this is why Phil was so valuable to me. And I was all wired up about somebody saying something and blah, blah, blah. It might have been Bill Deschamps who said this. Anyway, one of these 3 guys that helped raise me said, if you were walking down a country road, Bill, and you passed a couple of horses, and when you walked past, one of those horses farted, would you take that personally? I said, no. Look at it that way. So I try to. Yeah, go for the middle. Don't try to convert their choir. Um, okay, so I'm looking at what we got left on BillWhittle.com. We're going to get through all of these, and we'll get some, at least some, on the Facebook thing. Okay, so another one from Marusha Dark that's more or less about the stuff that I covered in Cerberus, so I'm gonna skip that one. Martin Archer, who's an eminent Fortunite. I love those names. Were you aware of and know anything about Chuck Yeager's disrespect of Neil Armstrong? There's more to the question, but the short answer is yes. Neil Armstrong was one of the most, well, he's my all-time, he's my number one life hero. And one of the things that makes me so fond of Neil Armstrong on a personal level is his humility. And I've never heard anybody say anything good about Chuck Yeager as a person. He is the prototype steely-eyed missile man, and as a pilot and as a test pilot especially, he is the legend that he needs to be. But I'll get to the rest of the question. I put Chuck Yeager in the exact same category as William Shatner. I've never heard anybody say anything good about those two men on a personal level. And yet, here's my office with, Captain Kirk's on that wall and that wall and that wall, and there's my flight helmet back there. I'm able to separate those two out. Anyway, to continue his question, I just reread Yeager, his autobiography, and Armstrong is in two of his anecdotes. In the first, he was training test pilots on certain aircraft, and he went up with Armstrong in a two-seater, and at some point they had to find somewhere to land. He said Armstrong wanted to land on some remote salt flat, but Yeager said he shouldn't, as there had been recent flooding in that area, and they'd get stuck in the mud and not be able to take off. Yeager said Armstrong overriding by landing there anyway, and they did indeed get stuck. But the anecdote that made me question the veracity of that event was when Yeager alluded to the Dave Scott Neil Armstrong Gemini 8 mission. He said that Scott rescued them from that incredible 1 revolution per second spin situation, not Armstrong. Now everyone knows it was Armstrong that rescued them, and Scott is on record everywhere, including YouTube clips, acknowledging that Armstrong saved their lives and also that he himself would probably never have been able to. So this makes me question Yeager's credibility on many matters, not just these ones. He was a genius pilot, but he was also a giant egotist. Your thoughts on that? My immediate reaction, I did not hear about Yeager. Who cares about, look, they landed on a salt flat, they got stuck, but they didn't get killed, right? Okay, so as far as I'm concerned, that old saw is true. Good landing is any landing you can walk away from, and a great landing is one where you get to use the airplane again. So I don't give a damn about the salt flat thing. But if Yeager, and I believe you, Martin, if Yeager is saying that it was Dave Scott who saved the Gemini 8 mission, then I can explain that to you very easily. Chuck Yeager is, in fact, an egoist, and he's a narcissist. And you have to have that kind of confidence to do the kind of things that they did. But I'm utterly convinced that Chuck Yeager never got over the fact that Neil Armstrong was the first man to walk on the moon, and essentially, you got to understand, these, as it points out in the question, these guys worked with each other for years. It's not like, hey, Neil Armstrong, oh, hey, Chuck, these are colleagues, these are office workers. They know each other very, very well. And I suspect that it has rankled Chuck Yeager that he wasn't the first guy to walk on the moon, and that Chuck Yeager would do anything in his power to lower people's perception of Neil Armstrong's and thereby raise people's perception of himself in the process. I hate to speak ill of the living. We said earlier in the show it's Buzz Aldrin's 92nd birthday today. Happy birthday, Buzz. I know somebody who worked with Buzz very closely for a long time. My friend Fritz Bronner did a board game called Liftoff, which was... By the way, if you can get Liftoff and you're interested in space, I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is an absolutely fantastic, fantastic game where you have 2 to 4 players, each building their own space program, deciding how they're going to do what they do. It's a really brilliant game. When Fritz decided to make that into a computer game, it changed from Liftoff to Buzz Aldrin's Race into Space. So basically, he just hired Buzz to be a face for the project. Here's your check, and now it's Buzz Aldrin's Race into Space. I never heard anything particularly negative from Fritz, but he worked with him for quite a lot. But I did hear stories about Buzz where, Buzz would visit some kind of aerospace plant, and all of the guys had gotten together and done something for him, and they were just asking for an autograph, and he refused to give it, or he wanted to charge him $10 or so. Just this kind of thing. So just to wrap this one up, Martin, two things that come to mind are, not only is it possible, but it's necessary to separate the individual from their achievements. Bart's treasures onto something that's a big part of this, I think. Yeager never had an engineering degree, which precluded him from the astronaut program, giving him an inferiority complex. Yes, Chuck Yeager was a guy from West Virginia who happened to shoot down 5 German airplanes on one mission, ace in a day. He's the guy who said, the first time I ever saw a jet aircraft, I shot it down. Chuck Yeager's the guy who got into the Bell X-1 with a broken rib, or more than one, had a sawed-off broom handle to close the door, dropped, and just went and blew through that demon in the sky. He deserves his reputation. And of all the things about Chuck Yeager, the most amazing things are some of his test pilot things where he's just about to die, and you listen to him, and he sounds like he's ordering a cheeseburger. So let me try this. I'm going to go inside and okay. But the reason that I admire Neil Armstrong as much as I do is he was a great man, and he was also a good man. And that's not as common as I would like it to be. He was a great, good man, and Chuck Yeager was just a great man. William Shatner is an iconic actor, and he always will be. Captain Kirk is a mythological figure. He's the Apollo, or the Zeus of a generation. But he's not a good guy at all. He's really nasty. I've worked with him on 2 occasions, and he's just a very shallow, very mean guy. Okay. That's okay. I don't have to. I'm not marrying William Shatner. I'm admiring Captain Kirk. Now, Dave Big Booty points out that today was also DeForest Kelley's birthday. And this is going to take a quick little detour, because I met DeForest Kelley once. And I'm so happy to be able to talk about this, because DeForest Kelley, unlike William Shatner, was a great, good actor. He's a great man and a good actor. If you've heard the story already, I'll make it brief. When I was, and your mom's birthday, happy birthday to your mom, Dave Big Booty. Excuse me. When I was working as a limo driver, all we did was drive executives from San Marino to LAX and back again. I'd make probably 3-4 trips a day in a Lincoln Town Car. So we never handled the Hollywood crowd, and we never handled the stretch limousine stuff. We just didn't. I came back from a long day, and I was really tired. I was sitting in the dispatch room filling out my paperwork, and somebody said, hey, we got some other limo company who's got a scheduling problem. They called us. Anybody want to go to the airport and pick up a TV actor or a TV star or something? And I kind of said, what's his name? And he said, oh, it's some guy who was on Star Trek, Mr. Forrest or something. And I said, DeForest Kelley? And he said, yeah, that's it, DeForest Kelley. And then there's like a bill-shaped outline in the dust like Roadrunner. I'm out to the car, and I'm on my way down to the airport. So I go to the airport, and I pick up DeForest Kelley. And he's wearing a neck thing because he had throat cancer, I think he's on it. But he had this really cool kind of a cravat on and all this stuff. And as I pick up DeForest Kelley, the guy from the original limousine company comes up to me and says, hey, we were able to get here in time. He's a regular client of ours. I'll take it from here, says this other driver. We'll pay you for the trip, obviously. Our company will compensate you for coming down. I said, I don't know if I can do that. This and this and this, and so on and so forth and so on. And maybe you should call and so on. And I really, So while he's busy calling, I get DeForest Kelley's bag off of the carousel, and into the car we go, because I'm driving DeForest Kelley home. He lived in a house that's just a stone's throw away from the intersection of the 405 and the 101, which is across the street from where my apartment was for many years. So I'm driving DeForest Kelley home, and I remember saying to him, you can tell when somebody wants to talk and when they don't want to talk, and again, there's a third in the middle when you can go either way. So I remember looking up to him and saying, Mr. Kelly, I hope you don't mind me just not asking you a question, just telling you something. I don't know if this is something that you fully realized, but you are immortal. You're immortal. You are part not of a TV show, but of a national mythology. As long as there's electricity, "He's dead, Jim" is going to be spoken. You are a mythological figure. And he said, that's the nicest way anybody ever put it. And I don't guess I really realized the impact. He said, "Look, honestly, Bill, it was an audition. I was in westerns. I did a lot of westerns, and they asked me to audition for this space thing. So I went down to this space thing audition, and I thought no one's ever going to make the show, and they ended up making the show, and I thought maybe we'll go a season. Ended up going 3, and then the movies come on and so on, and we obviously touched something." He said it was just an audition, and I never really thought of it as anything more than just another job. I said, "Well, you are, Dr. McCoy will be here forever." And we were quiet for the rest of the trip, and I dropped him off at the house. I got his bag out of there, got it to the door, and I said, "Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure and a real honor. You have no idea the effect you've had on me and millions of other people." And he said, "Hey, hang on one second." So I waited at the door, and how do I not have that here? How do I not have that here? I have it at home. I'll bring it in. I went inside, and he was in there for quite a while. I remember thinking, okay, going here. And he came out with a picture, a headshot of himself, publicity shot. And it's of him in the red tunic from Wrath of Khan with the green collar. And with a gold marker, he'd written, "Dear Bill, hang in there. Your friend DeForest Kelley." And that is one of my all-time prized possessions. And I can't believe it's not in the office. It's at home. And I just got in the car and I recovered the will to live, I had a similar experience with Dustin Hoffman, of all people. The very first show we did as on Sunday Morning Shootout, which was the longest gig I had in Hollywood. That was a 5-year job, and that is career employment for John Pershing wants to know, did he tip me? John, you leave us. You've spoiled my palate. He's kidding. Of course he tipped me. And then he gave me the picture. And the picture had a tip on it. You see how that works? Hang in there. So, first show we ever did on Sunday Morning Shootout, 5-year gig, lifetime employment by Hollywood standards, but unfortunately, we didn't know we were going to be there for 5 years. It was a 5-year job that was a series of 3-month jobs. How are the ratings? I don't know. We're going to be fired probably. Not fired, just, laid off because the show's going to get canceled. In any event, the first of those shows was Dustin Hoffman was the guest on the very first one. I was down there at the taping. I usually didn't go to the tapings. In fact, I didn't go to any of them after the first one or two. But I was there for the first one. And he was walking out of the studio, and I was right behind him. And it was the same kind of thing. I was right behind him, and I said, "Mr. Hoffman," and he turned around. He said, "Yes." I said, "I'm sorry to bother you, just something I just would like to tell you." He said, "Oh, by all means." Couldn't be nicer. I said, when you accepted your Academy Award speech, however many years ago it was, this would have been in 2004, somewhere around in there. And Hoffman had won years and years earlier. I said, when you accepted your award that night and you said, "This one is for all of the unknown actors out there," I was watching that show with about 15 other members of the theater department at the University of Florida. And I think every single one of us started to cry. And I can't tell you how much that meant to us. How much That one line meant to us because you made it sound like if you worked hard enough, you could get there. And he said, well, thank you. I, to my utter amazement, find myself on the receiving end of this kind of thing now. And I think I said last show, went out to Santa Monica the first day we were well enough to leave the house, decided to get a little bite to eat on the beach. And when I'm signing the check, the 20-year-old Mexican waiter says, oh, I thought it was you, sir. I'm a big fan of your stuff on YouTube. And it's like, my God, you could have knocked me over with a feather. I really needed to hear that on that particular day especially. Okay, here we go. So here's Rodney Rowe's question again, which we answered on the previous one about the live stream and stuff. So that's just a cut and paste. So Rodney, hopefully we got to that for you earlier. Troy Stevens, an eminent Fortunite. Remote volcanology during COVID is the title of this question. And for those of you not familiar, I frequently, in fact, tediously say, Bill, why are you still in California? Well, if you're going to be a volcanologist, you got to live under the volcano. Ha ha! What a wit. So I guess it got something to do with that. Bill, I'm so glad that you and Natasha are back to good health, but at the same time concerned and disturbed by the terrible ordeal that you had to go through and what a near thing your recovery potentially was. A lot of medication that I was expecting to take, that I had lined up to take, these Claymore mines I had in position, was unavailable when I needed it. Has the experience given you pause to consider whether remaining in California is good for your health? I'm going to kind of answer this one as I go through it. For most of the time I was sick, I was determined that the second I could stand up vertically, I would pack my bags and get the hell out of here and go to Florida or Texas. Tasha much prefers Florida. So looks like it'd be Florida. It troubles me that despite all that you knew regarding effective treatment and helped educate us about since the early Chronosphere Lounge days, you were unable to get treatment and medications that would have helped you because the state values its dogmatic policies over your life. That's in italics, period. What an incredible night this is in terms of the questions. Yes, that's precisely what I felt. Exactly what I felt. That I was very, very sick, and so was my beloved wife because of politics. Again, I might refer you to Cerberus, which just opened earlier today if you haven't had a chance to see it. Enduring mundane hardships to do some world-class volcanology is one thing. This could easily have been a matter of life and death. I grew up in LA, lived there 20 years, and California for 30. I know it's a unique place and has charms despite all the governing stupidity that's hell-bent on wrecking it. But we've entered a time where bad ideas have become not just heartbreakingly destructive, but truly and imminently dangerous. This is so eloquent. Please give this the serious thought it merits. We all care deeply about you. We don't want to lose you. It may be time to fight this battle from another front. P.S. Be happy. Come to Texas. Wow. Thank you very much, Troy. That was lovely and means a lot to me and means a lot to my wife too, who's watching. I was serious. I sent a text out to the guys. I said, look, I'm going to be down for another week, and the second we're done with this, I'm moving this company out of here. And I think Natasha would like that. And I know she loves South Florida, and it's clean and it's warm and all the rest of it. When I went to Texas for Thanksgiving, I want to say the year before I met Natasha, so it was either 2015 or 2014. And I spent 3 days there at a person's house, and I came back into an afterburner called, I think it was called something like, I can't believe they let you do that. Because that's all I said in Texas the time I was there. They let you do that? Yeah, we're gonna shoot skeet into the river. Just from your backyard? Yeah. Well, what about the houses around here? Aren't they going to call the police? Aren't helicopters going to arrive the second they hear the first gunshot? It's like you realize how I realized how it just, heavy and invasive all of this is. It's just outside of Texas. It's just outside of Dallas, in the country, not far. And then afterwards, we're going to do a bonfire. A bonfire, really? Yeah. I'm thinking, well, be moments before the fire department arrives and $1,000 citations are handed out. Nope. So there's a big appeal to that, and there's a big appeal to Texas because the economy is booming, and the biggest appeal of Texas is I'm already an honorary citizen of Texas thanks to Ted Cruz, and the fact that Texas is the only state that obviously was its own nation. So let me put it to you this way: if Texas decides to leave the union, it's a no-brainer because I would go to Texas. I would be more than willing to agree that since I'm moving from California, I forfeit my right to vote in elections again if you let me live in Texas. So there's that. Florida, on the other hand, as I say, my wife just loves it, and there's a lot to be said about Florida. I was down there a couple weeks before we got sick. And of course, Bart's Treasurer is pointing out no state income tax in Texas, and that alone is worth. It's 13% here in California. That's most corporations, most small businesses live or die on a 4 or 5% margin. That's it's a huge deal. And you factor in not only do I not have to pay state taxes if I were to move to Texas, but the rents would be a third of what I'm paying now. And there's a real strong argument to be made for it. And to be honest with you, it's so strong that it's practically overwhelming. And then today, my wife and I went up to see our chiropractor, who's given us both our mobility back. We both have injured necks from the past. And we're coming back down the Glendale Freeway, and I just looked at the car, and the temperature outside is 72 degrees. It's 72 degrees outside with 38% humidity, and I'm coming down out of mountains, and I look off to my left and I can see there's snow on Mount Baldy. Now that may not mean much to most people, but since most of my life had been spent in Florida, the highest point in southern Florida is 7 feet above sea level. I talked before about how my friend Phil had a feature on his car that was a manual car, and it was a Mazda, and it just had this brand new thing where if you were on an incline, the car would lock its brakes so you didn't have to roll backwards, because if you've ever driven a manual on a steep hill, you need 3 feet in order to do that. We couldn't find, there was no hill. We had to go drive for 40 minutes to get to Dadeland Mall so we could do it on a ramp in the parking lot. So every time I drive Laurel Canyon, I'm ripped apart by these conflicting emotions. One of them is this road is in such miserable condition that it really feels like a mountain trail. And at the same time, driving this canyon is the most fun I've had all day. And I don't know what I'm going to do. That's the honest answer. I just don't know. I know if we move, we'll take Shelley with us, because she's had enough of this out here. And this studio means so much to me, and it's a good time to thank the members for making this possible. Every time I come into this room, and I've come into this room every day since 2014, every single time I open the door, and when I close it too, I just say, I can't believe it. I can't believe that I work here. And I didn't want to give up the studio, but now I'm realizing maybe it's time for a new studio. Maybe it's time for a new studio somewhere else. So I suspect the answer, I don't know the answer. I suspect the answer is that eventually I will move, and I'll be heartbroken by it like a number of other people. And then what probably will happen is that I will get to wherever we go, and it's virtually certain to be either Florida or Texas. When I arrive there, I will undoubtedly, well, here's the thing about Florida anyway. Everybody I know who's moved out of Los Angeles, when I ask them how do they feel about it, every single person says, I can't believe I didn't do it 20 years earlier. Can't believe it. I am so much happier here. I know people who moved to Nashville and so on. Every single one of them was, I just wish I'd done it 20 years earlier. And so that would be very encouraging if I were going someplace new. But going to Florida brings a lot of baggage with it for me. I was not a happy camper when I was in Florida. And the humidity and the bugs and all of that were just a perpetual grind on me. So moving to Florida on a gut level feels like going backwards. Now, my sister and my wife have said, you're a different guy now. The experience will be different. And Natasha points out to me accurately enough that I go from my air-conditioned house to my air-conditioned car to my air-conditioned studio. So what difference does it make? The difference is, and this is the real reason why I'm in California, to be honest with you, is that if I move to Florida, then the hair goes. It's gone. It's not that it falls out. It just stops looking fantastic. Uh, I was a curly-headed guy my entire life. Always wanted to have straight hair. Always wanted to have hair that looked like this. I finally come to a place where it's dry enough to do it, and then I go back to Florida. And after 15 minutes of walking around Florida, my hair turns into a pom-pom again, like it did when I went down to Guantanamo Bay. Now, if I could perhaps, maybe I could take one of those boy in the bubble kind of things. Maybe I could have like a inflatable clear plastic bubble that would be humidity controlled. Might be able to do that. Fiery Waco wants to know, who am I trying to impress these days, Bill, since I'm married? Cares about what your hair looks like. And the answer, of course, is myself. Vanity is my middle name here. Troy Stevens, great thing for Troy to say. This is it's a great saying, and I only heard it recently. No man ever crosses the same river twice, for he is not the same man and is not the same river. Excellent advice. So here's what we're going to do. Bag of Sprite says, you almost died and you're worried about your hair? Precisely. Now you understand why I'm not a millionaire. That's precisely correct. You got it exactly right. That's how it works. Thou art stricken with vanity. Yes, I am. But the difference between vanity and arrogance is arrogance doesn't recognize its own vanity. I think if you can recognize your own vanity, then on some level, it's less crapulent. David Booty says, move back to America, Bill. I suspect that's probably what will happen. But yes, your point is exactly right, Troy. I mean, California nearly killed me. There was some real risk of me, being terminated by California policies. I'll tell you a little thing that I think almost certainly would do it. Gavin Newsom's talking about doubling the California tax rate from 13% to 26%. If he does that, then there's not going to be anybody left in California. And to be perfectly honest with you, one of the toughest things about moving out of California now is figuring out how to do it. It's not possible. You can't get moving companies, you can't get U-Hauls, you can't get anything. They're all going one way. They cost you $3,000 to move from Los Angeles to Dallas, and then U-Haul will pay you to drive from Dallas back to Los Angeles. So anyway, that's that. King of Cleans, who I've never seen comment before, says, you got to look good for your wife. You can never stop dating her, especially a catch like you have, Bill. Exactly right. And when I said I only do it for me, what I really meant, of course, was I do it to impress Natasha. And that vanity has nothing to do with it whatsoever. It's absolutely, completely dealing with, much higher plane than that. All right. Eduardo Henrique. Greetings, Bill. Wazard13 here, still working on moving to Red US. My question this week is your take on what happened to Mike Lindell, CEO of Good Pillow. If you don't know, his banks closed his accounts. Also, a reminder, TSL of December 16 last year was never placed on YouTube. Scott Ott had told me that when I was sick, but I had forgotten it. TSL of December 16th. I uploaded it. I probably uploaded the wrong one. I will check that when I'm finished tonight, and I'll if it turned out it just didn't get uploaded, I'll upload it tonight. Thank you for that. Best regards. You repeated 2 episodes by accident, so I'll go fix that. I thought maybe Scott might have fixed it, but I realized no. All the TSL stuff lives here. So Furball. So I'm coming. Hang on. Did I skip one? Furball, I'm sorry. I will get to you. You're right. I did skip you. It's because it was so short I didn't even see it. Okay, so as far as Mike Lindell goes, what they've done I think Mike Lindell has an enormous lawsuit that he has against these banks that to cancel his accounts because he's a conservative and a Trump supporter is got to be illegal. He's got the same kind of discrimination case that anybody who canceled him because you were black. We don't like black people at our bank. We're canceling your thing. Lindell is a really great guy. I don't know much about him personally, and he may be a little bit wacky, but on the other hand, he may not be. But the fact of the matter is, like, I've almost got his name. Oh, come on. All right, I have to ask the hive mind. Like the guy who started Chick-fil-A. Gosh, what is it? I'll be here in 3 seconds. He puts his money where his mouth is. He'd rather be true to his beliefs than make money. God, that guy's name is right here. Truman something. Cathay. Yeah. Okay. So like the Chick-fil-A founder, Chick-fil-A was originally just in malls. It was in the food court in malls, and they were closed on Sundays, which means they're not losing 1/7 of their income. They're losing a lot more than that. But he was a devout Christian. He said, we don't work on the Sabbath, so we're not going to open. And that is integrity. And without question, Mike Lindell has that. Mike Lindell has paid a big price for believing in his principles and being a patriot. And that's why you should go out and buy a MyPillow. And a lot of people are doing that. Here's the thing that Mike Lindell didn't do. Mike Lindell didn't apologize and he didn't backtrack. I've said this so many times, but it just can't be said often enough. If I make a mistake, I'll correct myself. If I make a mistake or hurt somebody's feelings because I made a mistake, I will correct myself and I will apologize. But if I'm right, I will never apologize. And I've been pressured to apologize at least once before by a previous employer, and I just said, no, I'm not going to do it. And in this environment that's so heavily politicized, if you say something that pisses off half the country, and then you apologize, you've just pissed off the other half of the country, and the first half of the country still hates you. Never, ever back up to the woke mob, or never back up to anything if you're convinced you're right. I have this ongoing kind of, weird sort of flash fantasy where I'm on some kind of like incredibly widely watched TV show, and I'm in front of 80 million people debating some woke social justice warrior, and they're talking about this and that, and I just basically say, you know what? Go F yourself. That's my reply. I'm pretty much done. Who do you think you are? And then the audience just rises in adulation, and the whole country is saved because finally somebody at the end of the Emperor's Parade says he's not wearing any clothes. I don't care. I don't care what you think. I don't care what you just go. Take a long walk off a short pier. And sometimes it's just that easy. Okay, I'm so sorry about that. For ball 321, from a comment on the web, if you've ever wondered what you'd have done in Germany, in 1930s Germany, you're doing it right now. Any comments on that? That is one of the great comments in the history of the internet. That is just absolutely, precisely correct. If you've ever wondered what you would have done in 1930s Germany, you're doing it right now. That is a profoundly good comment. And by the way, I'm going to be in Ramona. I've done Ramona. I want to say I've done Ramona 9 out of the last 10 years. My favorite event by far. We go to the Ramona main stage, and it's just a bunch of great people, and it's a great venue, and I'm just so comfortable there. So I'm doing Ramona in end of January, and I'm going to take the animation down there and run it for them. That'll be the first audience to see it as an audience. The business about the, if you wondered what you would have done in 1930s Germany, is really accurate. CP Tome says, be the guy that didn't salute. There's a famous picture of an entire, it's a stadium, grandstand. It looks like bleachers, rows of bleachers. And everybody's out there doing the Hitler salute, and one guy's not. And I think the Gestapo took that guy away. But better to be taken away and, you know, be on the side of the angels than to be taken away and shot in the back of the head, which is what happens even if you do the Hitler salute. Um, so here we all are, standing up to what the news media is telling us. Here we all are, people watching the show now, been called racist when we're not racist. We've been called, anti-science when we're not anti-science. We've been slandered and we've been abused, and we're still here. We're not going along to get along, and that's something we should all be actually proud of. Cody MacArthur Fett says he died from an Allied bombing raid 3 years after that. I think that sounds right, actually. So yeah, California is the land of people. Well, Los Angeles anyway. The definition of Los Angeles in the first years of the third decade of the 21st century is the sight of somebody wearing a mask in their car with the windows rolled up, driving by themselves. That's California. And that person, we know what that person would have been doing in Nazi Germany. They would have been right at the front of the line with their hands in the air, screaming Heil Hitler at the top of their lungs. Whether they liked Hitler or not, that's what they would be doing. Because that's what they were expected to do. That's what society was pushing them to do, and so that's what they would do. Kind of comes back to what Marusha said earlier about the division into threes. There are people who are true believers. There are people who are truly opposed to something, and then there are the middle. And the middle will go. And when it comes time to group psychology, the middle is not a third. When it comes to group psychology, the middle is at least 80% and maybe higher. In other words, social proof is everything. We've talked about this a lot in the past. I haven't talked about it too recently, but I remember somebody saying, if you're in Central Park, New York, or you're just walking down the streets of New York, and you have a heart attack and you say, help, then everything's going to depend on what the first person does. If the first person that comes up to you walks over you, then everybody else will simply walk around you as well. That's why this guy recommended, if you're having a heart attack in New York, he said, you in the brown jacket, call 911. Because otherwise, if that first person doesn't do anything, then people won't do anything either, because that's the social proof. So, in 1930s Germany, you had an excuse. Let me think about it. That's not how I want to put it. Yeah, I guess that's fair enough. In 1930s Germany, you had an excuse for supporting Adolf Hitler, as long as you hadn't read his book. If you'd read his book, then you have no excuse. But if you're just a guy on the street and this guy comes to power and he's been known as kind of an extremist and stuff, but it's 1930s Germany and all of a sudden the unemployment numbers are down, we're building autobahns and we hosted the Olympics and so on. Here's a guy who's bringing his country back from ruin. It's like Donald Trump trying to save the country, or Ronald Reagan or something. It is absolutely true that many Germans, probably most Germans, were astonished when they heard about the death camps and deeply shocked and remained deeply shocked, which is why Germany confronted their past in a way that Japan never did. But at the same time, you can say, well, they didn't know about the death camps, but they did know that the Meyers, who lived 2 doors down, are no longer there. And now we're moving into a better apartment. That they knew. And so you don't get to walk away from that. But look, to really get to your question, Furball, there are people who comply, and then there are people who aren't. I did a thing on that called Anticipatory Compliance. This is one of these psychological little nuances that are so interesting and so telling. I read a book called The Extermination of the European Jews. I think that was the title. And in it, the author, who is Jewish, survived the Holocaust, obviously, said that when they started instituting some of these most horrible policies, like now you're going to have to wear an armband with a yellow star on it. What this Jewish writer writing about the destruction of Jews in Germany said was that most Jews may have found the idea repugnant, but most of them were the first ones in line to get the star. It was what he called anticipatory compliance. In other words, by the point where they were able to legally force Jews to wear yellow stars on their armbands, the Jews had been so terrified and so dehumanized for so long that they wanted to show that they were on the team, right? They were on the team. Kind of like, okay, yeah, well, we're good Germans. If you say that we have to do this humiliating, degrading thing, then by golly, we'll be the first in line to let you know, because please don't kill us. And that doesn't work. It never works. It just never works. And this is the thing that is so alarming to me, and one of the things I think the most about. What point is the trigger? At what point will people in this country just stop taking this stuff? And I don't know the answer to that question, but what I do know is that the people who are doing what they're doing today, and once again, I'd refer you to Cerberus, which I think is a pretty good episode, actually. What they're doing today, they have an enormous advantage over Stalin and Hitler and Mao. And it's not the control of the information, because Goebbels pretty much controlled the information in Nazi Germany. What the people who are pushing this tyranny today have, that is invaluable tool of tyranny, is they have a feedback sensor. And what I mean by that is, in Soviet Russia or Nazi Germany, you could lie about, I'm a total supporter of Hitler. But when every single mouse click that you make is recorded, we tend to think, because it's not because we're vain as I am or anybody else, we tend to think they're recording my mouse clicks, those bastards are going to come after me with this one day. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. They don't care about Ben Shapiro. They don't care about the mouse clicks. They don't care. What they do care very deeply about is, what are people saying to each other on comments in things like YouTube streams and in emails. So what today's tyrants have is they have a perpetually adjusted, extraordinarily accurate view of just how angry the electorate or the citizenship is. The citizens, right? They are able to look, they're able to have artificial intelligence. This is common knowledge. Artificial intelligence is looking not only at our mouse clicks, they're looking at our emails and so on. And so in a very, citizenry, thank you, in a very, very, very crude example, if they were to suddenly realize that the word rebellion or, revolution were coming up in large numbers of emails, and they saw a dramatic shift in something or other, then they'd be able to say, okay, we're going to have to slow this down a little bit. We're pushing them a little bit too hard. They're starting to get to the boiling point. That's really what it is. It's like the tech giants today are like a thermometer that are monitoring the temperature of the electorate and the citizens of this country and citizens of the world. It's not just America, it's all around the world. The elites are able to monitor with a high degree of precision how irate their subjects are and adjust their tyranny accordingly so that it always stays below the boil. That's the one thing they're afraid of, is if it boils, then they're done, because they're a bunch of weaklings. These people don't have guns. The Nazis had guns. The KGB had guns. These guys have got nothing. If things get to a boil, they're finished. And so they are constantly watching how we react to things and making sure that they move slowly enough to keep things just under the boil. I had a thought the other day, I might have mentioned it before, but I really do believe it. I'm not sure that COVID-19 would have happened if people had reacted differently to the murder of Jeffrey Epstein. Now, you can say those two things have absolutely nothing to do with each other, and on some level you'd be correct. But I think that when I think that the murder of Jeffrey Epstein in his prison cell was a real, genuine green light for these people, because I think when they took that risk, because that's what it was, oh yeah, the video camera went out for 12 minutes. Really? Yeah, he's under constant video surveillance. Yep. And then the camera just burned out for some reason. Yep. And during the 12 minutes it was burned out, he hanged himself in the cell. Yep. And can I see the broken camera? Oh, it's working again. When you get to that point where you are lying to that degree, when you're Michael Jackson saying, I've never had surgery done on my face, when you are lying to people to that degree and nothing happens, then they know exactly how much we love our comfort and our complacency. And that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. When people were not in the streets demanding Hillary Clinton go to jail for this, demanding an explanation for this, they said, okay, so we've murdered a guy who's connected to the presidential candidate of one of the two political parties of the United States. We know for a certain fact that he's connected to her. We know he was murdered in his cell. We know he was murdered. They did it in front of our eyes. In front of our eyes. And we took it. And furthermore, they told us 15 days to flatten the curve. And it's been, 675 days now? The shenanigans that happened on November 4th happened, 9 months? The 2020 election, the 2020 election, happened 9 months after the pandemic. And that meant that they had 9 months of telling us what to do and us doing it before they pulled off this sneak attack. They already knew that we weren't going to do anything because we hadn't done anything when they told us 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and then it turned into 9 months. By the time we get to November of 2020, they said, let's go for it. If we don't, then we're ruined. So let's do it. Well, we're just going to steal it in front of the whole world? Yep. That's what we're going to do. And they said to themselves, what will happen is a lot of these conservatives and patriots are going to get very, very angry. They're going to get very, very vocal, and they're going to yell and scream and so on. And that's all that's going to happen. So who cares? I often wondered, how can they think we're that stupid that we don't see what happened with Epstein, and or with the pandemic, or with the election? And then I just suddenly realized it's just naive on my part. Of course they don't think we're that stupid. They know that we know. They also know that we won't do anything about it. Not anything that matters. So that's going to be the hard part. The hard part is going to be reaching a boiling point without them. If they can monitor the temperature of the people of the world to that high degree of precision and adjust the heat accordingly, then how do you get to a boiling point? You see what I'm saying? If it turned out, for example, if they kept doing whatever they're doing now, and more people are going to vote Republican, and it's going to outstrip the margin of cheating, because that is, you can't cheat your way out of all of it. I'm convinced you can cheat yourself into an electoral victory, 80 million votes or whatever. Okay, sure, but there is a margin beyond which you cannot cheat your way out of. And I think some of the things we're seeing now, like all of a sudden, maybe these masks aren't such a good idea. Maybe we should be doing that. And maybe all of this walking stuff back that they're doing now is happening because Republicans, is it 12-point switch, and Republicans have never been this heavily favored over Democrats in the history of polling. So they're turning the temperature down, and they're hoping that we're going to just cool down, and we'll see. We'll see. So that's the challenge. And the only thing we really have going for us is these people are actually remarkably, they're not stupid. They're just kind of dumb. You know? That's the one thing we have going for us. They think they understand us, but they don't. They don't. It's not just a question of don't understand patriots or conservatives. They don't understand people. The people who are doing all the tech manipulation are all on the Asperger spectrum. So even though they have the tools to do things like constantly monitor the temperature of those unwashed rubes out there, they still can't connect to us because they don't have human emotions in the way that we think of them. I'm not trying to dehumanize them. I'm just telling you this is a well-known, extremely obvious and well-established fact that a certain type of autism leads people to be very, very good at things like technology and computer numbers and stuff like that, and have very little human connection to people. It's just not there. You look at that reptile Zuckerberg, and you are looking at a prime example of a guy with very smart guy, ruthless guy, and a guy who has no human emotions as we understand them. If you haven't seen, The Social Network, which is now a decade old, the story of Facebook, you realize that Zuckerberg screwed every single person that he came into contact with, including the only friend he had. Totally raped them. He's not. Again, I'm not trying to dehumanize the guy, and I'm not trying to psychologically, indict my political opponents. But I do think that if you were to put Zuckerberg through any kind of a rigorous personality test, you would find him to be a sociopath. I don't think there's any question about that at all. None. Psychopath as well. Person who has absolutely no understanding that people are people and not props that get moved around. But when you look at him during the hearings, something wrong with that boy. All right. GK Masterson. Hi, Bill. Glad to see you're better. My question is, have you been following the issues with Activision Blizzard since July? And if so, what do you think of the entire mess up to and including their recent being sold to Microsoft? If not, then can you tell us what happened with Declaration Entertainment and the whole members vote on scripts to be shot idea? I thought it was pretty cool. GK. P.S. I'm still a woman. I don't know if it's GK Masterson just reminding me of GK Chesterton. I suspect that's the case in any event. Political Animal tells me there's more questions, which means I'm going to have to refresh the page, which means I'm not going to get to Facebook, which means I'm going to give serious thought to taking the show to twice a week. I'm happy to do it twice a week. It's just, again, I'm going to set up the YouTube thing and we'll do a members show, and then we'll do a Facebook questions live chat show, because I can't keep not getting to all of these questions. I'm moving through them faster, but it gets to a point when if all I'm doing is answering questions, then it's not this show anymore. So that is something I'm considering right now. For the first time ever since I've been doing the Stratosphere Lounge, I'm starting to think about maybe I need to do this twice a week. Anyway, to be honest with you, GK, I do not know anything about Activision and Blizzard at all. So I just missed that story probably because I was sick. So I'll answer the second one. What happened to Declaration Entertainment and the whole members vote on which scripts to be shot idea? I thought it was pretty cool. Declaration Entertainment consisted of me and Jeremy Boring. And somewhere in 2014, I want to say, Declaration Entertainment split into two different companies. One of them was BillWhittle.com, and the other was the Daily Wire. We talked about this earlier in terms of business acumen. Jeremy went out and got, this is all widely known, went out and got a number of millions of dollars from Texas investors. And Jeremy has the best business brain of anybody I've ever met. I told this story before, but I just love it so much. First time I met Jeremy Boring was might have been at a meeting of conservatives in Hollywood, if such an organization had even existed, which of course is kind of speculation. But I was sitting in that room, and I'm pretty sure I was running that meeting. In fact, I'm sure I was running that meeting. And I was sitting next to Andrew Breitbart. And in those meetings, we would go around the room and talk about ourselves, as much time as you want or as little time as you want. I got around to Jeremy, who was a little bit past halfway, and he started talking. And 3 minutes into him talking, I leaned over to Andrew Breitbart. I said, Andrew, that guy is the third guy. He's the third smartest guy in this room. I just love that. I was so pleased with that line. Sometimes I make myself I just wallow in my own crappiness. He wasn't the third smartest guy in the room. He may have been the second smartest guy in the room, and in fact, he might have been the smartest guy in the room. In any event, Jeremy and I got together. I left PJTV, and we took the membership model that was really just kind of starting then, paying membership for videos. That's kind of weird, but that's what TV was doing, but they weren't doing it real well. It would just basically, bleeding money out of the billionaire that was behind it. So we both wanted to make movies, and we kind of together hacked out this idea of Declaration Entertainment, where we would have members, and then if we had enough members, we'd be able to make movies, and then we would involve them, and they'd be citizen producers. That was the term that we used. Now, it's not that Declaration Entertainment failed. It's just that in order to succeed as a business, I wasn't going to make that thing succeed as a business. Declaration Entertainment was basically my fans coming over from PJTV to Declaration Entertainment. And Jeremy was running the business. And it became clear that in order to grow that thing, it wasn't going to be a two-person job. It was going to be a one-person job. And I don't know if it was just pride or whatever, but I just gotten finished working for people, and I was thinking, okay, great to be working on my own. So we started that, I want to say, in 2009, and somewhere around 2013 or 14, Declaration Entertainment rented an office space just down the street here. We had a relatively large room for Jeremy's office, and I had an edit bay, and that's where we did the first Stratosphere lounge shows from before I got the studio. And then when we went our separate ways, I took the membership with me. Jeremy had gotten the investment from Texas. And then I saw what a real business mind and a real smart guy could do. Within a short period of time, they had taken the 3 adjoining spaces, and then, again, a short period of time, they had taken over the entire floor. A year later, they'd taken over 2 floors of the building, and a year or so after that, they simply moved to what was their main location here in Los Angeles. And the next thing you know, they've got 4 floors of this massive building. They have their own studios. They've got remote controlled TVs. They got all of this stuff. And that was where I did Apollo 11 and the Cold War and America's Forgotten Heroes. We shot the last episode of America's Forgotten Heroes, I think 2 days before the 2020 election, and they had already decided to move to Nashville, and they moved within a week after that. There's an element to this too. Jeremy and Ben Shapiro started working together on the thing that was run by by David Horowitz, and they started Truth Revolt, which was Daily Wire. And then things happened there that I'm not going to get into, but basically they stopped backing Truth Revolt, and so Jeremy and Ben went out and found some investors, and they just basically reproduced Truth Revolt. They'd taken Truth Revolt to the Stratosphere. You know, they were getting links from Drudge back when Drudge was a conservative website. They're getting that almost every day. So Jeremy and Ben are starting to work together, and they're really starting to go with their business, and I'm just kind of wandering off on my own doing this stuff. And I've told this to Jeremy's face several times. In fact, I tell him this pretty much every time. What you have done here with Daily Wire is the most astonishingly disciplined success that I've ever seen in my life. They are a phenomenal company, phenomenally well run. And when they started this, my understanding, I was not privy to any of the stuff that happened with their investors or anything that happened with Ben. But basically what they did when they went to these Texas people is they basically said, we're going to lose money for 4 years or 3, whatever. Here's our plan. We're going to lose money for 3 years. We're going to lose a significant amount of money. And then on year 3 or 4, we should start to break even, and then it will increase like that. And then the next thing you know, they're not just a media powerhouse, they're a financial powerhouse. They have genuine power. And it's all through the real hard work of Jeremy Boring and the talent of Ben Shapiro and vision of a number of Texas investors, and precisely the kind of thing that I am not good at doing, and that is putting together a business plan and sticking to it. I don't have the brain for it, and I don't have the inclination for it. On the other hand, I can not only break down this political stuff, I can tell a story. And we didn't have any real evidence of me being able to tell a story until we did the Apollo 11 series, which became the number two in the world. And then Cold War, what we saw, also became America number 2 podcast in the world. Might have been number 1 for a day or something. And then America's Forgotten Heroes hung around it got to number 2. It was in the top 5, top 10 the whole time. So I'm not saying this to salve my ego. I'm just saying this is the division of labor. Jeremy and Ben turned Daily Wire into a juggernaut through hard work and talent and real hard work and persistence, confidence, all of those things I admire. I didn't do that here at BillWhittle.com, but nobody over there can do what I do when I'm on my game. There's not a person over there who could have written any of those 3 shows I mentioned, and this is why business is grand. They didn't have to. They hired me to do it. When people say, "Well, why is Apollo 11 not visible on YouTube?" Well, it's not visible because Daily Wire took it down. And why did Daily Wire take it down? Well, they took it down because they wanted to put it behind their paywall, because Daily Wire is a well-run business. And when you are running a business well, you understand these things, right? I wasn't happy about it, but I didn't have any say in it, and I just can't say this clearly enough. I feel no resentment about it whatsoever, none. They paid me to write and produce, to write and to deliver that show, and I agreed to it, and I agreed to the rate, and I delivered the show, and they delivered the check. It's their property. I knew it from the beginning, and I also knew that they can do whatever they want with their property. And if they think it's good for their company to put it behind the paywall and take it off of YouTube, then that's what they paid for. And if they hadn't been such a well-run company, they wouldn't have had the money to pay me to write the thing, and it never would have been done. So that's basically it. So I'm just looking here. Oh my gosh. CP Tome says the best TSO moment ever for me was sitting in a Burt Rutan congregation at AirVenture, that's in Oshkosh, listening to Burt say, quote, and here's something that my friend Bill Whittle made about Apollo, unquote, and then he played about 10 minutes of it. I was in TSO with my phone right then. That is also one of the high points of my life. Really. With the exception of meeting my wife, it may be it may be the most rewarding thing that ever happened to me, because actually what happened, CP, was that he didn't play it, he read it, and I got to see Burt Rutan on camera in front of a bunch of pilots flying experimental airplanes reading my script for Apollo 11, what we saw, and the section he read was the thing that I was actually most proud of. As certainly, if it wasn't my favorite moment in all 4 episodes, it was certainly one of the top 3. And that was the picture of Neil Armstrong taken after they had done the moonwalk, which I will find for you. Because it's an amazing picture. You've probably seen the picture. But like, as we said earlier in the show, this is my lifelong hero. So where is it? There it is. You have a higher res version? Yeah, there we go. So I took this picture and I used it in the Apollo 11 What We Saw series. And then Burt took this picture at Oshkosh in the big theater there, and he put this up, and then he read my script, and Burt Rutan was crying. And that was the high point of my life. And I can't really repeat it, but basically this is what I said. I think this picture was taken right after they landed. I think it was before the actual walk. And I said, if you look at this picture, there's so much there. On one hand, if you look at his eyes and think about the stress that he was under, even if the landing had gone perfectly, and it didn't go perfectly, it was a very dicey thing. When they shut off the engine, they had 16 seconds of fuel left, and they'd had a standing order to abort if they got below 60 seconds. So they just landed on the moon, taking off their helmets, I think, and Buzz took this picture of Neil. And I said, the first thing I see when I see this picture is that his eyes are watering. He's almost crying, and he's almost crying because he has just done the most difficult thing in human history with the entire planet on his shoulders, and he didn't screw the pooch. He didn't screw the pooch. So that's there. But I said there's something else there too, and that is, if you look at this picture, there is in this man the expression of a 5-year-old boy who comes out of his bedroom on Christmas morning and sees the bicycle he always wanted right there under the tree. There's that sense of, oh my God, there it is. He looks like a kid on Christmas morning who just got the bike he wanted real badly. And this picture, to me, is the entire Apollo program. All of it in this one picture. Because you can see the strain, you can see the stress, and they've just shut the engine down. And he's not shaven, and he undoubtedly smells bad, and he's, all of this stuff. But he did it. He did it. And he knows he did it, and he's at the point now where I think emotionally he's able to release this thing that he's been carrying around for at least 2 or 3 years since it was announced he was going to be Apollo 11, and probably longer. But it's finally off his shoulders. The final thing I'll say about this picture is, what strikes me about this image of Neil Armstrong is I've had this feeling, and I'll try and explain it to you in a minute. But what strikes me about Neil Armstrong is in this picture, he realizes it doesn't matter if I die now. If I die now, it's okay. If we don't get off the moon, it's okay. Because we did what we said we were going to do. And that's what that expression is telling me. Now, when I say something like that, and I tell you I can connect to that, I can. I've told the story a few times before. I've had it happen to me many times before. The first time it happened to me, I had just gotten my glider license, my glider's pilot's license, and I was probably on my third or fourth solo flight. I was in a little Grobe 102, which is a one-seater. And I was flying over Mojave. It was a long drive. It took me an hour and a half to drive up to Llano at Crystal Soaring. That's where I learned how to fly. Same sky as Chuck Yeager breaking the sound barrier. And on this day, it was the strangest day I've ever seen in terms of meteorological conditions. It was wintertime, and there was a wind coming from the north, and I was on the northern side of those mountains, Mount Baldy and all the rest of them, that separate Los Angeles from Mojave Desert. So I was on the Mojave Desert side of this. And I was practicing ridge soaring. Now, if you're in a glider, you're coming down. You're coming down all the time because you got no engine. The trick to flying a sailplane is, can you find air that's going up faster than you're going down through it? So that you're going down through air that's rising faster than you're going down, so you go up. You can do that with a thermal, which is a bubble of hot air that gets heated on the ground and just rises like a hot air balloon. And you just have to sense that. Or you can do it through ridge lift. If the wind is coming across the desert and hits the mountains, the wind has to go somewhere, and the wind has to go up. And there is a gradient there, and you have to be pretty close to the mountain in order to be part of the air that's rising fast enough to keep you going up. And it was a combination of meteorology that I'd never seen before out there. There was snow on the mountains, so there was moisture in the air. Something just flew through the frame. Did you see that little feather angel or something? And I'm riding this ridge lift. A guy named Andy Hollabeck, who was a flight instructor who I liked very much, was some small distance in front of me in a two-seater in a 103. And I'm in this Grobe 102. It's a bathtub with wings. And I got close enough to the mountain to start getting ridge lift, and I'm going up, and I look off to my left, and this air that was rising was cooling as it got higher. It cools, but there was enough moisture in it so that it would cool, and it formed a vapor, which meant that off my left wing was a waterfall of vapor that was going up. It was like an inverted waterfall. And I look off my left wing, and there's this thin line of clouds that are just going up. And I could dip my wing in it. I could actually just dip my wing in it. And I kept riding that ridge. And you're close enough so that you can see squirrel tracks. And if you're trained well and you keep your speed up, you can get pretty close there, because what's going to happen? You have an engine failure. If you keep your speed up, you can get pretty close. And I was pretty close to that ridge. And remember, I just started flying. And then finally, as we went further and further, I got higher and higher. I got to a point where I could see the Pacific Ocean, and I was over one cloud deck and under another, and the sun was setting. Pacific Ocean was like hammered gold. The deck above me was gold. The deck below me was red. I was in this tiny little tunnel like a box. And there's the sun, and here's my wing, and here's and like a diamond bullet right through the forehead. At that instant, I said, I don't care if I get hit by a truck on the way home. Now, Pear Blossom Highway is one of the most dangerous roads in the country, and if I go through the grill on a truck on the way home, it's okay, because I did this, and this was worth my entire life. I've had that feeling 2 or 3 times, never quite as strong as that, but it was crystal clear. It was that sense that I have done something not only difficult, but something that I've wanted to do that I consider to be miraculous, and I've done it well, and And for whatever reason, God let me do it and see it. And now that I've done that, it's not like I want to die. It's not like, hey, now I'm going to start doing adrenaline things. It wasn't that at all. On the contrary, I've been very careful. I'd like to live a long time. But it was like, you have not squandered your life. You have done something. You have done something important enough to justify your existence here. You stuck with it. You learned to fly and you didn't have any money. I was making $50 a day raking rocks in order to get the flight lessons out there in the Mojave Desert. And in the summertime, raking rocks in the Mojave Desert is not much fun. And I did it. And that's what I saw in that picture of Armstrong. And I'm sure that this was the expression I had on my face when I was looking out there at this sunset. In fact, I'm sure that's exactly what I look like. So, Bert read what I'd written in the script, and Bert kept breaking down crying. And when I realized, my God, I've written something that's made Bert Rutan cry. It's one of my all-time heroes, talking about my other all-time hero in front of Dick Rutan, I think, who was there. I'm not 100% sure about that. Who's a third of my all-time heroes, and Mike Melville, who's another one. And they're all just sitting there listening to me tell this story about this guy, and he can't get through it because he's so emotionally moved. I just said, here's another one of those moments. It's okay now if I go now. I don't want to go now. Natasha apparently doesn't want me to go either, although I'm less clear on why. But it's okay. The other time that I felt it may seem strange to you. The two other times I felt it, although one was just kind of a precursor shadow of it. Actually, wasn't it? After I finished flying there, I went back to Florida. I learned to fly. I soloed on the 4th of July, 1990. And I stayed there, and I was working as a freelance writer, and I was writing comedy for Kaiser Permanente, the healthcare company. Yes, I was. And I was writing comedy bios of their staff. They took good care of their staff, and they would have these annual award ceremonies, and I wrote videos. I wrote scripts to that would be pre-recorded and played while they're walking up to get their prize. And so I'd been here for a while, and I was sick of the traffic, and I'd given up on trying to make movies with Hollywood, and I just said, I'm going to go back to Florida. I want to do a sketch comedy show. I am actually literally mailing it in before the internet. I would get a series of questionnaires that I had designed, and the people had filled them out, and there'd be 35 of them or whatever in an envelope, and then I would take them out one by one, and I would write a little comedy bio about that person. I'd send it in, and they would send me a check, which meant I could work from Antarctica if I had reliable mail service. So I said I always wanted to do a sketch comedy show, and tried to make it out here in Los Angeles, just didn't work. So went back to Florida. I was here from 88 to 92, went back to Florida in 92, went back to the theater department where I'd been a student from 79 to 81, 82, 10 years earlier. Ran into a whole new group of people, ran into the guys that had this improv company and a bunch of other comic actors. And I knew TV production, and they didn't. And we went to Cox Cable, that had a studio in Gainesville, and they had a requirement to do public access TV. I don't know if that's still a thing, but at the time, if you put in a cable franchise and you're going to basically monopolize the content for that area, you had to provide public access. There've been a bunch of great shows that have been parodies of that. So we went down there and found another member, a guy named Jeff, who was just a great guy, and we did 3 TV shows, and I've got them on CD, and I will convert them and show them to you. We did a show called Grazing. We did 3.5 episodes, I want to say, and oh my God. I don't know how this happens in show business. It just does. I can't explain it. I don't know how it happens, but it did. And it happens like this so many times. It's, I think there's a line in Shakespeare in Love where they talk about this, how it's like everything is about to crash to the ground right this second, but it never actually does. So we had announced the premiere episode of Grazing, and there was a place in Gainesville called the Cinema Cafe. It was a big room that looked like a restaurant, and they had a gigantic projection screen, and you would go in there and watch movies. Cinema and Cafe, I think, something like that. You go in there and watch movies, but instead of sitting in rows of movies, you could have pitchers of beer and chicken wings, popcorn, all that other stuff. So you just sit in this room. It was perfect. So we didn't have to pay for it. We said, we're bringing all these people. So invited the entire theater department. There's probably 150 people in there, my new peers, although most of them were younger than me. And the people are filing in, but I'm not there. I'm at Cox Cable still editing the show. And and let's just say it was going to be a 9 o'clock premiere. Next thing I know, it's 9:25. It's a 20-minute drive back to the place from the studio, and I'm not done editing yet, and I am losing my mind. I'm getting calls from the guys saying, and people are getting really restless here. I said, yeah, we'll go out and tap dance or do something, because we're leaving here in 5 minutes. Grab this. I didn't have to grab the tape because it was coming out over Cox Cable. I had to get to the premiere, and Jeff stayed at the studio. He was going to punch the tape when I told him, all right, I'm here. So I get there. I'm an hour late, and I just get up and say, hey, sorry about all this, the delay, and hopefully you'll think it was worth it. I know I do. So thanks for your patience, and hope you enjoy this first episode of Grazing. At which point, one of our team members called Jeff. Jeff hits the button on Cox Cable, and the cable feed is projected on the screen, and there's the show. And I'm in the back of the room, and I'm just pacing back and forth. And there's a moment that if you've ever been in a car crash, you know what this is like. Time really does slow down. And time slowed down for me so much. That's how stressed I was. It slowed down for me so much that I remember again and again and again, well, that line just bombed. That didn't get a laugh at all. And and then all of a sudden you hear this wave of laughter. And I realize I am thinking so quickly that the gap between them hearing the line and the laughter seemed like 20, 30 seconds to me. So I'm walking back and forth in the back of this, and people are loving the show. This is way before I did eject. Nobody knew who I was. I didn't even know who I was. And I'm watching this thing, and I'm watching people really love this show. And I'm watching actors and writers really love this show. And I remember thinking to myself, well, how about that? It's just a year or so ago I had that experience on a glider. Here I am again now. It's okay if I have done a comedy show, finished it, aired it, and watched an audience reaction. That's what I wanted to do. And I did it. And that was another moment where I said, it's okay if I, again, not in any hurry to go anywhere, but I could at least face St. Peter and say, yeah, I didn't squander everything here. I did many of the things I wanted to do. And it just continues on a daily basis for me, not with that power, but, I'm here in my studio doing a show, talking to you people. And it's inconceivable to me. And I got a lot more big plans in motion, including plans with Daily Wire and big ideas. So it actually worked out real well. They did the business thing, which they're very, very good at. I continued to do what I was doing, and then we did a number of shows together to show both them and me that I can tell a story that people are willing to pay for. In fact, it can be the second biggest podcast in the world. That's how good the storytelling is, if I do say so myself. And so they went their way, I went my way, and now I think we're at the point they've already told me they want more of those kind of shows, history shows. But I'm going to go back out there, talk to them in person, and I'm going to talk about, why don't we just go long here, because none of us get any younger. Why don't we just go long? And we'll see. But I will get that thing. It's just that simple. I just don't have a CD player. Get one. I'm sure I can get one on eBay for like $4. Somebody's gonna send me one now, undoubtedly. But I'll get it there, and I'll do it. Uh, CP Tome says, "Oh, it is that good." I thought you were wondering, is it that good? Grazing was a strange show, and I'm very proud of it. But it's on some level, it's kind of meta. Um, uh, the premise of this, and by the way, I had just gotten 3D Studio version 2, so I did all the computer graphics opening and computer graphics, bumpers, in and outs to commercial, even though we didn't have commercials. And I look at it and I think about it. I haven't seen it in years and years and years, but I know how primitive it was. But at the time, it was pretty cool. Um, and the premise of Grazing, I wanted opening credits that kind of set the thing up the same way that I Dream of Jeannie, did, or the Beverly Hillbillies or whatever. I just wanted opening credits that basically said, "Here's what the show's about." And when I finally show them to you, they're just so primitive. And I think, honest to God, I think I'm serious about this now. I think our output resolution was 320 by 240. It might have been a little bit higher, but it wasn't much higher. Um, anyway, so the opening of the show is you see planet Earth and you see this flying saucer heading towards Earth. And then inside the flying saucer in a clear dome on the top are these two cows. And they fly low over the Earth and they start dropping remote controls for television sets, just seeding the planet with them. They're just dumping them everywhere like pamphlets. And then you see this really kind of low class, kind of fat couple sitting there, cartoon fat couple, real people, sitting on a couch, and they're, drinking all this other stuff, and they're going, tsh, tsh. They got the remote control, and they just keep changing channels. And then you do a cutaway to the channel, and you'd see a segment, and then static, segment, static, segment, static, and they're not even watching. They're just grazing. They're just constantly changing the channel. And then the final shot is the flying saucer heading back out into the space, and the two cows look at each other and nod. It's like, yes, we've done it. We've turned them into herd animals. That was the whole idea. So the entire premise of Grazing was that you were essentially watching Cox Cable. You weren't watching a show. You were watching any number of shows on a cable franchise. It's like Netflix, but just you're just what's next. And the part about that I liked so much was it did three things for us. First of all, it allowed us to do a sketch on anything. The second thing it did was it kept to my rule with that no sketch would be longer than 2 minutes. Some of them were 2 or 3 seconds, but nothing longer than 2 minutes at all, because I'd watched Saturday Night Live enough to know that they had so many good ideas that were good for 2 minutes, and they'd stretch it out to 8 or 9 because they have live show. They got to finish it up. None of this was live. It's all pre-recorded. And so I said 2-minute limit on the sketch. That is the longest we will do. And most of them were much smaller than that. But because of the format, we not only got to do the sketches we wanted to do, we also got a way to kind of organize them, because we started coming up with our own fictional channels. For instance, I think the first one we actually recorded that was any good was a show on the Acid channel, the LSD channel, the Acid channel. And I did an animation of like a smiley face button, and then as the animation proceeds, the smiley face button just kind of X's out. He just and it was the Acid channel. Dun, dun. And the show that we did on the sketch was Pete Hirkin came up with the show. So the show on the Acid channel was called Look at This, and it was basically Pete was a hippie, looked like a hippie, and he's sitting there cross-legged. He's got his John Lennon glasses on, and he says, "Okay, now, all right," and he says, lights a smash. Now look at this. And he holds up the match, and in the background, I'm doing all this kind of weird stuff on a chroma key, and I'm showing what Pete sees, and these guys are staring at this match, So we got a chance to just move. We'd eventually do another couple of acid channel shows. We had a channel called Wife Time, which was the the women's programming thing. We had this was back when 900 numbers were big. The sex call-in numbers. We did a sketch. We had very talented people working with us. We did a sketch with this actress named Jolene Graham. And she was dressed as a clown, and she looked like a clown. She was just great. And the whole thing was a 1-900 number for clown sex. And ends up with her, you got a little lapel thing, and it's squirting the water, and, and she's talking about her I'd like to take you, and I think one of the lines was, yeah, I'd like to take you and 49 of my closest friends and get in a little car and drive around and around and around and around and around. And we just really, grew into it. And some were stronger than others. I wrote a sketch called Universal Solvent about a cleaning device that consisted of was oxidized hydrogen, H2O, and this guy's holding up the H2O molecule. It's covalent bond. It's patented covalent bond. And that was a fun joke if you're a chemistry major. But the classic sketch, the widely recognized classic sketch, was called Sonny and Mick. And it starred my friend Pete Hurtgen and my other friend, Ron Smith, who died not too long ago, 3-4 years ago, of cancer. The funniest guy I ever met, and the weirdest. And Pete and Ron were both in the improv company, and they were good friends, and they had spent so much time together clowning around that they had gotten very, very good at fake punches. And this is what a writer's meeting would be like for us. And the writer's meetings for Grazing were one of the most fun, just the most fun I've ever had in my entire life. Working with, we're doing 3 hours, I don't care. Working with those guys on a one-on-one basis and bringing in ideas once or twice a week and pitching the ideas, that was the most fun I've ever had on a consistent basis. And Ron had an uncanny gift. Ron Smith could do a perfect sound of crickets. I mean, perfect. And so I'd pitch an idea and I'd finish it. I'm waiting for something. And as everybody's like quiet, and all of a sudden you hear this. It's like, oh, you're going to give me crickets on this, Ron? And we're always teasing each other. So here's Sonny and Mick. So these guys had spent so much time just passing the time in the improv thing that they just practiced all these punches, and they were actually getting really good at it, like stuntman good at it, to the point where you could look at it and say, man, I gotta tell you, it really does look like you hit him. And because it was a comedy show, they would take a sip of water and spit it out, you get punched and spit it out. So I said, okay, let's go shoot that. And we went up to the studio at about 1 a.m. It was me, Jeff Michaels, who was the technician, Pete Hurtgen, and Ron Smith, just the four of us. And I knew what I wanted it to look like, so we had a chair, a wooden chair. Ron was in a wife beater T-shirt, clearly with his hands tied behind him. Real noir. There was nothing visible but this pool of light. There was a light just hanging there, like the interrogation light. And he's got this really hard key light on him, and he's obviously being interrogated. And then Pete is a little bit more put together. And they start this conversation, which I guess we all wrote together, kind of. But basically what it was Pete was about to beat the living daylights out of this guy to get a confession out of him. And they're both Irish. And they're both brothers. And Ron is the younger brother. and he's got some information, and Pete's the older brother, and he's putting on his gloves, and he's saying, all right, Mickey, and it's Sonny and Mickey. So the sketch just consisted of him beating the daylights out of Ron for a minute and a half. We got this real serious, somber music, and then they have this conversation about, look, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this either. And so this instant he throws the first punch, the instant that first punch hits his face, Ron goes like this, spits out this huge cloud of spit. My main job was directing the thing and constantly filling Ron's mouth with water so that we had this effect. And the first punch, like this, and the second punch, and Ron's conserving the water, and he's just pounding the daylights out of him. And when we were editing it, we'd had this kind of somber music. But the second that first pitch hit, I immediately went to an instrumental version of the Irish Washerwoman, which you probably know. It's and we just kept playing that. And so he punches and punches and punches him. And then this is the one thing that the format of the show, the clicking format, this gave us so much freedom. So I did it to the point where I thought, okay, people get it. And I'd hang on to it long enough so that it actually kind of got funny. And then we cut. And that was it. We went to 3, 4, 5, 6 other sketches, 7 other sketches, something like that. And then as they click through the channels, we come back and it's 10 minutes later. And he's still pounding the daylights out of this guy. He's a little more rough, a little more ragged. Boom, 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 couple lines, did you see the Dodgers game last night? Oh, I just go for the Coney Islands. Oh, well, psh, 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 back again. So finally we do this 3 or 4 times. We call these running jokes, running gags, which reminds me of a thing we never shot. So finally, after we've done this 3 or 4 times, now Pete is exhausted. He's covered in sweat. His clothes are completely out of here because he's been pounding on him. Ron, who's had the living crap beaten out of him for the last half hour, is absolutely fine. Hasn't changed a speck. Pete's just he's staggering. He punches, and by accident he hit the light and knocked the light back and forth, and it's swinging, and that looked great visually. And then they get to their final line, and Ron says something that makes Pete so angry that he hits him as hard as he can, and that makes Pete go down unconscious. The guy who's doing the beating, he's lying on the floor. Ron is still in the chair, completely untouched. He's just had the living daylights beaten out of him. He's absolutely fine. And he's like, Mickey, trying to find out what happened to his brother. So that was the classic sketch because it just looked so good. It was just, all the shots on Ron were high shots looking down. All the shots on Pete were from Ron's perspective. I was lying on the ground on the floor of the studio with a camera in my hand, and I'm shooting, looking up at him, and cut together so well. It looked so good. And we used to love those running gags. We actually had a sketch we didn't shoot called Running Gag. I wish we had shot it because it was a it was a horror movie sketch, and you've got this young girl, and she's in the house. And the murderer's in the house, and we set the whole thing up. We didn't shoot it, but we had it written. And we were going to, we had the dark shadows, we had the house, and the phone call. He said, he's inside the building, and she grabs the knife, and then you see the murderer with the knife like this, and he starts coming through the kitchen after her, and she goes running out the back door, and runs out into her yard. And then we cut. And then we come back 4 or 5 minutes later, and she's running down the street, and then we cut. And then we come back 3 or 4 sketches later, and she's running down a country road, and then we cut. And finally, we got to the point where she's at the beach and runs into the ocean. She just kept running, wasn't being pursued at all. The guy never followed her. We just called it the running gag. We just thought it was hilarious. It was such a weird show. There's a place, I think the first sketch we ever shot, there's a place just south of Gainesville called Payne's Prairie, which used to be a lake and drained because of sinkholes or whatever. So this big flat grassland. And it is the biggest nothing there is. It's just a giant circle of nothing. And we went out there, and I had a a friend of mine who was married, had kids, and he came out there as a family. And then we had 3 or 4 of our guys in Scottish kilts pretending to play bagpipes and pretending to drum. And they were walking down Payne's Prairie, and then this family was there watching them. And it was an advertisement for tourism for Greenland, I think. They're, yeah, and this is the most ridiculous thing in the world. There's one little tiny family there just watching, and it was a tourism ad. We just had so much fun. So anyway, that's that. Somebody said there are new questions in the thing. I'm gonna refresh and do a quick look. I'm obviously gonna have to do more than one of these a week. I see one new one. Let me see if there's anything else. Bob Neef. Looks like it's Bob Neef. It's Bob Neef. All right, I'll read this one because it's there, and then we'll figure out what we're going to do about Facebook. Sorry about Facebook. So Bob Neef says, I talked to a board-certified internist last week for 90 minutes about 1V3RM. Oh, yes, I see. The ivermectin thing that you're not allowed to have. The drug, which I'm sure would have been censored, so he uses 3s for E's. She's all for it and quit her job because she can't do her job anymore within a big medical machine. How do we fight this? I asked her, why does big medicine and the government hate inter something or other so much? She said that it was because for the government to get an emergency use order for the Victrola, there had to be no other alternative. That I didn't know. So therefore, ICTR something or other could not work, or they couldn't get their emergency use order. Thank you, Bob. So now you know why my wife and I were as sick as we were. Really sick. Scary sick. We were scary sick because, again, I would refer you to Cerberus, which is about this exclusively, and this kind of mental breakthrough I had to make me realize what was actually going on here. But we were very, very sick because the antiviral medication that my doctor had told me we would use in the event of us contracting this was no longer available in California. And I didn't know why. I just assumed it was sold out or blocked or whatever. Now I know why. Because, and I did not know this, and this is a critical piece of information. In order for them to get, not to get the Victrola out fast enough, but in order for them to get the legal immunity that was written into the law several years ago that said that you can sue drug manufacturers for anything except for Victrolas. That's the one thing that you can't sue them for because it's considered an emergency measure. What I find out from Bob through his internist friends is the reason that these non-Victrola treatments were eliminated was because if there was a viable treatment for the unknown virus of unspecified origin, then they would not have their emergency use medication, which means they would not have qualified as a Victrola, which means that there would be legal consequences if there were to be something going wrong with that. Isn't that interesting? I didn't read it. I thought about reading it in Cerberus, the Moving Back to America I keep talking about. It's basically one of the fine people out there sent us, well, they might have sent us some medication that got lost in a terrible boating accident. And as Scott pointed out, I need to do something about that. My seamanship is terrible. I'm got to get some lessons. But this is something called Mask Plus, and it's a treatment plan for the unknown virus of unspecified origin and which medications to take at what dose at what point in the progression of the malady in question. Now, I did read this in Cerberus. This is from this thing that's written by doctors. He says, we're living through a period of time characterized as a vacuum of truth with misinformation, disinformation, blatant lies, censorship, and nefarious intentions being the order of the day. It's difficult to dissect out the actual truth and discern who to trust. Furthermore, it is no longer controversial to acknowledge that drug makers rigorously control medical publishing, and that the Lancet, New England Journal of Medicine, and the Journal of the American Association are utterly corrupted instruments of pharma. So I read that during the Cerberus thing. Here's the thing I didn't read. I thought about it and I just didn't. Talking about treatment for the unknown virus of unspecified origin without Victrolas, using all the medications that had been shown to be effective. And they closed this thing by saying, the relentless malpractice of deliberately withholding early effective COVID treatments, of forcing the use of toxic remdesivir, may have unnecessarily killed up to 500,000 Americans in hospitals. I think our total war dead from World War II was 435,000 killed. It's not a joke. Not a joke. And my entire attitude once I got over the shock and horror of what happened last November, a year ago, November 2020, was that, okay, now they're getting what they wanted, and now what they wanted is coming into contact with reality. Yes, this is what he said, do not take that medication. That's what they're saying here too. They're saying don't do that one. Anyway, so the press labeled it a, aquarium cleaner, and said with Joe Rogan it was a horse dewormer and all the rest of it. And that may have unnecessarily, when I say unnecessarily, I mean preventably, killed 500,000 people in this country alone. And who knows what it is worldwide. All right, well, this has been quite an adventure and kind of fun too. 3 hours and 15 minutes. I don't know if that's the all-time record, but it's certainly in the top 3. And we didn't touch Facebook, so I think we're going to have to do something about this. And I'm going to look into the mechanics of, the what is it called, Super Chat or whatever, where you pay money to get your questions starred. It just seems kind of cheesy to me, but I guess I should, not be so sensitive about these kind of things. But we did get them all done in at BillWhittle.com for them anyway, so that's something. All right, so I think it's probably time for me to wrap this up because I still have some work to do. I have to upload this show. I have to upload the one I got wrong. I have to do thumbnails and prep for the virtue signals that we shot early today. So I'm going to be here for a while, but I love it here. Next to being home, it's my favorite place. And we all owe that to the members of BillWhittle.com who pay for all of this stuff. And they pay for it every month, and I never ever cease to be amazed by it, and I never ever will take it for granted. And I'm just real happy to be here, and very, very, very touched by all of the kind words and all of the sentiments and the get wells and all of the people who say that this stuff matters. Just close by something I've mentioned once or twice before. When I started writing Eject, within the first year of me writing essays at Eject. Oh, that's good news about Alex. Somebody sent me a picture, and it was a picture of a truck on the Blue Ridge Highway in North Carolina, and it had a bumper sticker that said, read eject.com. And what's interesting about that is that I didn't sell bumper stickers. Somebody had gone to the trouble to make a bumper sticker on their own, put it on their car, and drive around with it. And that blew my mind. And that was another one of those moments. Anyway, so here we are. There are bigger audiences out there, but not better ones. And in the immortal words, it's one of my favorite moments in show business too. There was a producer at PJTV who was the executive producer named Owen Brennan. He was a terrific guy. He really, really knew his stuff. And he left to start his own consulting company. And he gathered us all together, tech guys and on-camera talent, told us how much he enjoyed working with us, and said, I'm gonna miss you guys. And the last thing he said was, I just want you to know, I would rather work with you guys than with the best people in the world. Maybe my favorite insult of all time. I'd rather work with you guys than with the best people in the business. Was that from Roxanne? In any event, whatever it's from, I just loved it. All right, gang, that'll do it. I'm gonna catch up on my uploading, and then I'm gonna hit home. And I'm starting to feel better enough, so talk to Doomcock, talk to Gary over at Nerdrotic, see if we can start making some appearances. I think when I release the first episode of the animation, that should make it a little bit easier. All right. Good night, Mrs. Nussbaum, wherever you are. And we'll see you next time right here on the Stratosphere Lounge.